Chapter 1812. External Object. Yi Xian's external object is naturally the green profound sword. However, he doesn't really want to use the green profound sword. The current him really doesn't want to use his bloodline power and the green profound sword too much. However, if this Apotheon Mu uses an external object, he will definitely use it. Facing a powerhouse of this level, he doesn't dare to have the slightest contempt. If the other party uses an external object to directly kill him, that would be a pain in the ass. Yi Xian spread out his palm, and the green profound sword appeared in his hand. When he saw the green profound sword, Apotheon Mu said in a deep voice, "The power of the universe's law origin. You really are that supremacy's person." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Actually, I don't really want to use external objects. How about we have a fair fight?" Apotheon Mu said with a smile, "I know, you want to use me to practice. However, I want you dead." As he spoke, he spread out his palm, and the piece of God paper slowly floated up. Looking at the paper, Yi Xian frowned. "What is this thing?" Apotheon Mu said with a smile, "God paper." Yi Xian shook his head. "I've never heard of it." Apotheon Mu laughed. "Yi Xian, this is a real ancient divine object." As he spoke, he suddenly bit his finger and then wrote two blood-red words on the God paper, "Yi Xian. Yi Xian." As soon as he finished writing, Apotheon Mu's entire body trembled violently. A powerful force suddenly gushed out of his body and then converged on the God paper. Boom! The God paper directly burned. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned, secretly vigilant in his heart. This thing is a bit mysterious. At this moment, the space around him directly burned. Nameless fire. Yi Xian was startled in his heart. He quickly urged his profound qi, and a powerful sword momentum swept out of his body. Boom! As soon as the sword momentum appeared, the surrounding space directly boiled up. However, the nameless fire still existed, not affected at all. In the distance, Apotheon Mu suddenly laughed and said, "Yi Xian, this is Yang fire, a Yang fire that specializes in burning lifespan. In this world, other than venerables, not even ancient god realm masters can escape from this fire." As he spoke, he glanced at the divine paper. "Once this paper burns out, you'll be finished as well." Yi Xian's face darkened. He discovered that his lifespan was indeed disappearing at an extremely fast speed. But he didn't understand why. Directly targeting lifespan? Not only that, but he also discovered that his soul leaf was disappearing at an extremely fast speed. Yi Xian couldn't help but look at the divine paper. Damn, this thing is a bit strange. At this time, Apotheon Mu suddenly smiled and said, "Are you in despair?" This fire was the Yang fire of the human world. Nothing could invade it. Even the power of laws could not harm it in the slightest. In this world, it belongs to. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly swung his sword lightly. Boom! With a wave of his hand, the Yang fire disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian looked at Apotheon Mu. "What does it belong to?" Apotheon Mu's face was full of astonishment. Yi Xian smiled and said, "This fire doesn't seem to be anything special. Could it be a fake fire?" Apotheon Mu stared at the azure sword in Yi Xian's hand. "There's a problem with your sword." Yi Xian blinked. "What problem?" Apotheon Mu's face was extremely unsightly. "Your sword," Yi Xian immediately said, "this sword is called Azure Profound. It can cut all causes and effects in the world. As long as it's within the rules, there's nothing this sword can't cut." He paused for a moment and said, "I made this sword myself." "Bullshit." Apotheon Mu said angrily, "You made it yourself? Where's your face?" Yi Xian raised the Azure Profound sword in his hand and said with a smile, "I'm not going to talk about this with you. Come, take this sword of mine." As he spoke, he suddenly disappeared on the spot. Chi! A wisp of sword light flashed across the field. In the distance, Apotheon Mu's face instantly changed. He crisscrossed his arms and pushed them forward. In an instant, the space he was in directly turned into an impenetrable wall. Facing Yi Xian's sword, his instinctive sense of crisis made him choose to defend instead of facing it head-on. At this moment, the space he was in had condensed thousands of space-time. The strongest defensive stance. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword arrived. The sword in Yi Xian's hand directly passed through countless spacetime and slashed Apotheon Mu's arms. Boom! Apotheon Mu's body instantly disappeared, and his soul directly retreated nearly 100,000 feet away. Apotheon Mu was stunned. Yi Xian was also stunned. Apotheon Mu was stunned because Yi Xian's sword directly ignored his spacetime. His spacetime defenses didn't seem to exist in front of Yi Xian's sword. This was simply impossible. As for Yi Xian, he was stunned because he discovered that the Azure Profound Sword could ignore spacetime. The core of the Azure Profound Sword itself was time and space, and it even surpassed the time and space of the current universe. Therefore, it could directly ignore the time and space of the current universe. Yi Xian looked at the Azure Profound Sword in his hand. At this moment, he recalled Qing Er's words. The sword still had many functions, and he had to slowly experience them himself. At this moment, Apotheon Mu suddenly said, "Is this the sword that supremacy gave you?" Yi Xian looked at Apotheon Mu and laughed. "What do you think?" Apotheon Mu was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Apotheon Mu's face changed drastically. He wanted to flee, but Yi Xian's sword was faster. Chi! The Azure Profound Sword directly pierced between Apotheon Mu's brows. Apotheon Mu's soul stiffened. He was gone. He hadn't expected that not only would he fail to kill Yi Xian after bringing the divine paper out, but he would be killed by Yi Xian instead. Yi Xian was scary. However, the sword in Yi Xian's hand was even scarier. He wanted to inform the Tomb of the Gods, but the Azure Profound Sword locked his soul, and he couldn't move at all. At this moment, the Azure Profound Sword was frantically devouring his soul. Apotheon Mu looked at Yi Xian. "We all underestimated you." Yi Xian smiled. "I originally had no enmity with the Tomb of the Gods, but now there is. I won't talk to you because I know it's meaningless. So, either you die, or I die." Apotheon Mu slowly closed his eyes. As Yi Xian said, the Tomb of the Gods and Yi Xian had no enmity, but now, both sides were irreconcilable enemies. Apotheon Mu still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Have a safe journey." After saying that, he spread out his palm. Boom! The Azure Profound Sword directly absorbed Apotheon Mu's soul. After absorbing Apotheon Mu's soul, the Azure Profound Sword trembled violently. This is the soul of an ancient God realm expert. It's not an ordinary nourishment. Soul said excitedly, "Young lord, this soul is not an ordinary nourishment. It would be great if a few more came." "A few more?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Little guy, do you think souls are cabbages? This is the soul of an ancient God realm expert." Soul giggled, "If 2 more come, I can definitely break through." 2. Yi Xian smiled and said, "There will be a chance. Although there are few ancient God realm experts outside, there are definitely many inside the Tomb of the Gods. 2 ancient God realm experts' souls are not a big deal." Yi Xian laughed, put away the Azure Profound Sword, turned around and disappeared. Tomb of the Gods. In front of a certain tomb, Apotheon Mu suddenly turned around. Not far away, a tomb suddenly disappeared. Seeing this scene, Apotheon Mu's expression changed. "How is this possible? People die, the tomb is destroyed. And this tomb is Apotheon Mu's tomb. Apotheon Mu is dead." Apotheon Mu's face was extremely unsightly. Was it Yi Xian who killed him? But his first thought was that it was impossible. How could Yi Xian kill Apotheon Mu? Apotheon Mu was a veteran ancient God realm expert. But what about Yi Xian? He's just a spacetime realm expert. But if it wasn't Yi Xian, then who killed him? Apotheon, you fell silent. It doesn't matter who killed him. It's troublesome. Suddenly, a voice resounded from the side, is he dead? Apotheon, you turned around, and a middle-aged man walked over slowly. Apotheon, you was slightly stunned when he saw the middle-aged man, and then he hurriedly said, Left Apotheon, why are you up? The left Apotheon shook his head, I feel slightly uneasy, that's why. As he spoke, he gazed at Apotheon Mu's tomb, tell me about it. Apotheon, you nodded, and then he told the left about the enmity between Yi Xian and the tomb of the gods. After a short while, Apotheon, you shook his head, it's not worth offending such a genius for such a trivial matter. Apotheon, you fell silent. Actually, he felt that it wasn't worth it as well. But who would have imagined that Yi Xian was such a monstrous genius? Unfortunately, there were no ifs. Suddenly, the left Apotheon said, even the Supremes agree to kill him? Apotheon, you nodded, there seems to be some enmity between the Supremes and the Supremes. The left Apotheon smiled, then let's kill him. Apotheon, you gazed at the left Apotheon, and the left Apotheon said, people like Yi Xian should either be friends or enemies, and they must be eliminated at all costs. A monstrous genius like him will be too terrifying once he grows up. Most importantly, the Supremes support us in killing him. Apotheon, you nodded, that's what Apotheon Mu and I think as well. But now, Apotheon Mu has fallen, and we don't know if it was Yi Xian who killed him or if someone else helped him kill him. The left Apotheon suddenly said, why don't we lead him here? Apotheon, you smiled bitterly, both Apotheon Mu and I thought so as well. But he's very cunning, and he won't enter this world easily. The left Apotheon asked, does he have any friends or family? Apotheon, you said, yes. But our people can't touch his family, because those of us who can get out aren't his match. And the few of us who aren't afraid of him can't get out because of the restriction of the laws. Saying this, he felt a little sullen. If they could get out, it wouldn't be difficult to kill Yi Xian. The problem was, they who could suppress Yi Xian couldn't get out. After a moment of silence, the left Apotheon said, then bring him here by force. Inside Xiao Ta, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment, he was combining his flying sword technique with the head-lifting technique. Flying sword art. After a few years, Yi Xian had perfectly combined the two. As for how powerful it was, he didn't know, and he wasn't sure if it could kill an ancient god realm expert. After all, an ancient god realm expert wasn't simple. After combining the flying sword art and head lift art, he unlocked the second seal of his father's sword imprint. As soon as the second seal was unlocked, 4 words entered Yi Xian's mind: Invincible Sword Domain. Chapter 1813. Invincible Sword Domain. Yi Xian was stunned. Something about the sword domain? Soon, more and more information entered Yi Xian's mind. Gradually, Yi Xian's expression became serious. Invincible Sword Domain. This was also a sword technique. However, this was only the upper part, and the core of this upper part was defense. Using the sword as a domain to guard a realm. Defense. Yi Xian began to study this invincible sword domain that his father had left behind. It definitely wouldn't be bad. Moreover, he just happened to lack a defensive sword technique. This invincible sword domain was perfect. The core of cultivating this invincible sword domain was to comprehend the sword domain, and Yi Xian just happened to have comprehended it. However, his sword domain was of little value and hadn't been very useful. However, after studying the invincible sword domain that his father had left behind, he found that he was wrong. This sword domain wasn't just a normal kind of terrifying. Moreover, he didn't have a thorough understanding of the sword domain. Sword domain. Using the sword to form a domain, and this domain could be independent of time and space. A domain was equivalent to being independent of the current universe. Of course, it was very difficult to achieve this. However, he had all the time to study and cultivate. 10 years inside Xiao Ta was equivalent to 1 day outside. This was too abnormal. It was so abnormal that even he felt it was a bit excessive. This was a bit like cheating. However, he liked the feeling of cheating. How depraved. Yi Xian laughed. Continue cultivating. Somewhere in the clouds, a woman sat cross-legged in the sea of clouds. Her eyes were slightly closed, and she seemed to be one with heaven and earth. This woman was the supreme law of the universe. At this moment, the clouds in front of her suddenly parted, and in the next moment, a woman slowly walked over. This woman was the supreme behind God's graveyard. The universal law opened its eyes and looked at the woman. "Ce, your people have left God's graveyard." Ce smiled. "Really? Why didn't I know?" The universal law stared at Ce. "Your people are targeting that youth." Nie walked in front of the universal laws and said with a smile, "Isn't it normal for juniors to quarrel?" After a moment of silence, the universal law said, "Are you going to touch my people?" Miyi's eyes narrowed. "It's really your man." The law of the universe said, "He's my man." "Chi, if you have something against me, don't target him. He's just a child." "Child?" Ee suddenly laughed. "Fan Duo, you are so funny. When your man killed my man, why didn't you say he was a child?" Fan Duo stared at E. "Don't touch him." The corner of Miyi's mouth curled up. "I'm going to move." Fan Duo suddenly stood up. She stared straight at him. "I told you. The grudges between us are our business. If you have anything, you can come at me. Don't touch him. If anything happens to him, I'll fight you to the death." She smiled and said, "Looks like you really care about him. The more you care, the happier I am, haha." With that, she turned around and left. Fan Duo glanced at Nie, who had disappeared into the distance, and said indifferently, "Don't hold back, target him to death." Inside the Xiao Ta, Yi Xian was still cultivating. Several years had passed. He had to admit that every time he cultivated, time passed by abnormally fast. Cultivation knew no time. In these years, he had not only thoroughly stabilized his realm, but he had also stacked drawing sword to determine life and death to 820. This was the limit of what he could do now. 820. In fact, his goal was 1000. However, he couldn't do it. Moreover, even 820 was a bit difficult for the Mausoleum of Swords to bear. Therefore, he had to find a way to improve the Mausoleum of Swords. Apart from that, he had also cultivated drawing sword to determine life and death to his limit. However, he still wasn't confident that he could kill an ancient god expert in an instant. When he fought against Apotheon Mu before, if he didn't use the Azure Profound Sword, he was always at a disadvantage. Of course, if he used the Azure Profound Sword now, he was 90% sure that he could kill an ancient god expert in an instant. The Azure Profound Sword's improvement was too terrifying. However, he still didn't want to use the Azure Profound Sword. After all, the Azure Profound Sword's power wasn't his own. External objects. In the past, he had relied too much on external objects, so his strength and mental state had improved slowly. Now, he wanted to rely more on himself. Of course, if others used external objects, or if the enemy was too strong, he wouldn't hold back. Besides drawing sword to determine life and death and lifting sword, he had also successfully cultivated the invincible sword domain. Domain defense. One sword, one domain, one world. The strongest defensive sword technique. As long as he activated the invincible sword domain, he was practically invincible within it. Unfortunately, he only had the upper half of it. The upper half was defense, so the lower half was definitely offense. He was very curious about this part of the attack. Because the best defense was offense. After a while, Yi Xian decided to remove the sword mark his big brother left behind. However, at this moment, he seemed to sense something, and his brows suddenly furrowed. In the next moment, he vanished on the spot. Yi Xian had just left Xiao Ta when a shadow appeared before him. Apotheon Yu. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. I'm very curious. How did you find me? Venerable Yu said plainly, was it difficult to find you? Yi Xian smiled, forget it. Let's not talk about this. This time, you're just a shadow. It seems like you're not here to kill me. Why, are you trying to reconcile? Reconcile? Venerable Yu smiled, what are you dreaming about in the day? Yi Xian laughed and waved his hand casually. Chi. Venerable Yu's shadow was erased. Yi Xian was about to turn and leave when the space above his head suddenly trembled. Then, the space split open and a huge black mirror floated out. And the black mirror was facing him. Yi Xian frowned. In the next moment, the space around him became illusory. In the blink of an eye, he appeared before a graveyard. God's graveyard. Yi Xian's face darkened. He was forcefully sent to God's graveyard. And the black mirror was still above his head. At this moment, Venerable Yu appeared before Yi Xian. In front of Venerable Yu stood a middle-aged man. It was the Left Reverend. Two ancient God realm experts. The Left Reverend sized up Yi Xian and frowned, space-time mirror. He didn't think that Yi Xian was really just a space-time mirror. Yi Xian looked around, it was dark and oppressive. Behind the Left Reverend and Venerable Yu was a graveyard. Yi Xian looked curiously at the graveyard and asked, are there treasures here? Venerable Yu laughed, you're very calm. Yi Xian looked at Venerable Yu, you want to fight me 2-on-1? Venerable Yu shook his head, no. Yi Xian nodded. Good. Venerable Yu added, we want to fight you 5-on-1. 3 old men suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian. All of them were ancient God realm experts. Yi Xian was enraged, 5-on-1, where's your face? Where's your face? Venerable Yu laughed, we're shameless, what are you going to do about it? Yi Xian laughed heartily, and with a thought, he disappeared from the spot. He disappeared without a trace. Venerable Yu and the others were dumbfounded. He disappeared right under their noses? At this time, Yi Xian was outside the Tomb of Gods. In his hand was the profound azure sword. The profound azure sword could ignore space-time, and not only could it be used to kill, it could also be used to escape. As long as he wanted to escape, not many in this world could catch up to him. Yi Xian looked at the entrance of the Tomb of Gods in the distance, the corners of his lips curled up. He already knew the world inside the Tomb of Gods. As long as he wanted to, he could enter any place in the Tomb of Gods at any time. Of course, he was afraid of being ganged up on. If he was entangled by 5 ancient God realm experts, he would have a headache. However, to him, even if he couldn't win, he could still run. As long as he didn't fight to the death, forget 5 ancient God realm experts, even 10 wouldn't be able to kill him. Within the Tomb of Gods, Venerable Yu and the others were stunned. He ran. This guy ran away just like that. And he ran right under their noses. Even now, they didn't know how Yi Xian escaped. The Left Hall Master spoke abruptly, we were careless. Venerable Yu spoke solemnly, how did he escape? There's a barrier between the Tomb of Gods and the outside world, but he didn't pass through it. He just vanished into thin air. This. The Left Hall Master spoke softly, space-time Dao. He used space-time to escape. It'll be even more difficult for us to catch him. As he spoke, his expression darkened. He hadn't expected Yi Xian to be proficient in space-time Dao. Venerable Yu asked, what should we do now? The Left Hall Master spoke indifferently, there's only one way to make him stay here, and that's to make his loved ones stay here. As long as he has someone he cares about here, he won't escape. Venerable Yu fell silent for a moment, according to what I know, while the Heaven Abode was looking for him, there's another person on the wanted list. The Left Hall Master asked, who? Venerable Yu thought deeply for a while, it seems to be a woman in a plain dress. It's said that she's Yi Xian's younger sister, and they're quite close. If we can find this woman and bring her here, then we can use her as a hostage. That Yi Xian will definitely give in to us. The left hall master fell silent for a while. Did you find her in the heaven abode? Venerable Yu shook his head. No. What they told me was that this woman hid herself out of fear. Then he looked at the left hall master. This is the only solution we have at the moment. That is to find this woman and bring her here. Otherwise, Yi Xian won't give in. If he doesn't want to stay here, then we can't do anything to him. The left hall master said, then we'll find her. Find her at all costs and bring her to the tomb of gods. Venerable Yu spoke solemnly, we might have to use some ancient divine items. The left hall master closed his eyes slowly, use them at will. We must find her. Venerable Yu nodded, understood. P.S. One vote is also love. Asking for votes. Although the update isn't ideal, I still want to ask for votes, thank you. Chapter 1814. It didn't take long for the entire God's graveyard to start searching for that woman. Moreover, the God's graveyard's power wasn't something a small abode could compare to. For a time, countless scouts had headed throughout the universe to search for that woman. In the building. In the building. The building master's expression was extremely gloomy. The woman by his side spoke in a low voice. Why did the God's graveyard look for you? The building master sighed softly. They want us to help them find that woman. The woman frowned slightly. They want to make a move on the people around Yi Xian? The building master nodded, yes. The woman said, help? The building master fell silent for a moment, and then he said, I'll contact Brother Yi and see what he has to say. As he spoke, he left and went downstairs. In a certain part of the starry sky, the building master had just appeared when Yi Xian appeared before him. The building master hurriedly said, Young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled, did something happen in the God's graveyard for you to come look for me personally? The building master nodded, they're looking for your younger sister. Yi Xian frowned slightly, my younger sister? Which younger sister? The building master's expression was slightly strange. Does this fellow have many younger sisters? Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, Building master, you still haven't answered me. The building master hurriedly said, they're looking for that woman in a plain dress. Yi Xian blinked. He found it hard to believe. Why are they looking for her? The building master spoke in a low voice. They probably want to use her to threaten you. Yi Xian fell silent for a long time, and then he said, brilliant. What a brilliant move. I admire them. I, Yi Xian, admire them from the bottom of my heart. The building master hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Young Master Yi, their plan is truly vicious. If they were to find your sister, you and your sister's situation. Yi Xian nodded, I understand. The building lord glanced at Yi Xian, I wonder what plans young Master Yi has. Yi Xian said, I originally had a lot of ideas, but I didn't expect them to do something like this. I don't have any ideas now. Tower Lord Xiao Lu, Yi Xian glanced at the small building's owner, they asked you to help them search. The building master nodded, that's right. Of course, I won't really help them find it, they. Yi Xian smiled and said, help them find it. The building master was stunned, why? Yi Xian said seriously, if you don't help them find it, they might target you. The tower lord said in a deep voice, but if I find it, this, Yi Xian smiled and said, I won't blame you. On the contrary, they will thank you. The owner of the small building frowned, why is that? Yi Xian blinked, and then he said, do as I say. I will bear all the consequences. The building master glanced at Yi Xian, and after a moment of silence, he said, okay. Yi Xian smiled and said, if there's any news about God's graveyard, remember to inform me. I, Yi Xian, will always remember this favor. The building master cupped his fists, Brother Yi, don't worry. If there's any movement, I will inform Brother Yi immediately. Yi Xian nodded slightly, okay. The building master said, Brother Yi, take care. With that, he turned and left. After the building master left, Yi Xian suddenly said softly, "This god's graveyard is really something. Why did they suddenly take it so hard?" He really didn't expect God's graveyard to look for Qing-er. Look for Qing-er. What kind of divine operation was this? He was stupefied. At this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, look at Shaoan." Shaoan. Yi Xian was shocked, and he hurriedly entered Xiao Ta. Within Xiao Ta, Shaoan was lying on the ground, and flames were emanating from her body. Yi Xian was just about to approach when Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, don't come near. This fire will burn you to death." Yi Xian glanced at the flames, and then he said in a low voice, "What's going on with Shaoan?" Xiao Ta said, "I don't know. She was playing around just now, and she suddenly burst into flames." At this moment, Shaoan suddenly said with a trembling voice, "Big brother Yi Xian." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Shaoan, are you okay?" Xiao An's entire body curled up, and he said with a trembling voice, "It hurts." Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the green profound sword appeared in his hand. He directly slashed forward. Hiss! The flames on Xiao An's body were directly split into two, and then they escaped from Xiao An's body. After the two flames escaped from Xiao An's body, they merged into one, and then turned into a human face. A human face. Yi Xian stared at the human face. "What are you?" The human face also stared at Yi Xian. "Ignorant mortal, you should stay away from the holy venerate." The holy venerate? Yi Xian looked at Shaoan in front of him. "She is the holy venerate?" As he spoke, he walked in front of Shaoan, and was about to carry her up, but at this moment, the human face suddenly said angrily, "You mortal, you have no right to touch the holy venerate, you." Yi Xian suddenly raised his hand, and he suddenly raised his sword. Boom! The human face was directly split into two by the green profound sword, but very quickly, it merged back into one, but it became a lot more illusory. After the two merged back into one, it looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand, and its eyes were filled with fear. You mortal, this sword." Yi Xian glanced at the human face, and then said, "Who the hell are you?" The human face stared at Yi Xian, and then said, "I am the Fire Lord under the first god in the world." Yi Xian slightly frowned. "God?" The human face looked arrogant. "You mortal, why are you still not kneeling?" Yi Xian held the green profound sword in his hand, and raised it. "Believe it or not, I will cut you in half." The human face glanced at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand, and it was obvious that it was very afraid. It hesitated, and then said, "Mortal, do you dare not to use this sword?" Yi Xian laughed. "This fire of yours is really shameless. I am a swordsman. If not a sword, what else can I use?" The human face stared at Yi Xian. "Mortal, you," Yi Xian suddenly said, "what do you mean by ordinary? I really don't like the way you act all high and mighty. If you dare to call me that again, I will immediately cut you up." The human face said angrily, "I am the Fire Lord, I have a godhead." Yi Xian laughed, and said, "What god?" Qing said that there is no such thing as a god in this world, only some relatively strong people, and when they become strong enough, they will call themselves gods. Bullsh *t. The human face was furious. "What she said is bullsh *t. She knows nothing about power. Only an ignorant person would say such ignorant things." Yi Xian frowned, and at this time, Xiao Ta suddenly could not help but say, "I don't like what you said." The human face stared at Xiao Ta, and then said, "You mortal Ta, shut up, you have no right to speak to me." Yi Xian, hearing this, Xiao Ta instantly jumped up. F***ck your ancestors. I gave you face, but you don't want it. As he spoke, he directly rammed towards the human face. Rumble. In next to no time, the tower and the flames started fighting. Yi Xian was shocked. He realized that after Qing's transformation, Xiao Ta was quite fierce. He could actually resist the human face's flame. Even he was slightly afraid of that flame. At this time, Shaoan, who was in Yi Xian's arms, suddenly said weakly, "Brother." Yi Xian quickly looked down at Shaoan, and then he held Xiao An's hand with his right hand, and countless strands of violet energy surged towards Xiao An. Xiao An looked at Yi Xian and said softly, Am I going to die? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, silly girl, you are just a little weak, how can you die? Xiao An was about to speak, but the human face in the distance suddenly said, ignorant mortal, put down the holy venerate. Yi Xian looked at the human face, and the human face and Xiao Ta were entangled, and neither could do anything to the other. Yi Xian couldn't help but look at Xiao Ta. Damn! He realized that Xiao Ta had concealed his strength earlier. The flame of the human face was extremely terrifying, and even he was slightly afraid of it. But now, Xiao Ta was actually able to fight it for so long. Obviously, Xiao Ta had concealed his strength earlier. At this moment, the human face suddenly stopped, and it looked at Xiao Ta, you stupid tower, you have some ability. Xiao Ta said indifferently, don't act tough in front of me. Let me tell you, I'm invincible under 3 strikes. I'll trade 1 for 1 above 3 strikes. As it spoke, it charged at the human face. Yi Xian's face was filled with black lines. Damn! Why does Xiao Ta know how to act tough now? 1 for 1. Damn! This is too shameless. At this moment, Xiao An suddenly looked at the human face. You are? The human face suddenly stopped, and it quickly said, Holy Senior, I'm Fire Da. I'm your most loyal subordinate. Yi Xian suddenly said, aren't you the subordinate of the number 1 deity in the world? The human face said angrily, Holy Senior is the number 1 deity in the world. Yi Xian turned to look at Xiao An, and Xiao An was confused. I don't know anything. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ta, who still wanted to fight. Xiao Ta, wait. Let me ask it. Xiao Ta snorted, and then retreated to Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian looked at the human face. How is Xiao An the number 1 deity in the world? Can you tell me? The human face said angrily, you human, you don't deserve to talk to me. Yi Xian moved his mind, and the green profound sword flew out. Boom! The human was blasted 30 kilometers away by the green profound sword, and as soon as he stopped moving, he started to vanish at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Yi Xian did not hold back this time. In the distance, the disappearing human face's expression changed drastically. When it saw that Yi Xian was about to attack again, it hurriedly said, Mortal, human, we gentlemen use our words, not our fists. Let's talk, don't fight. Yi Xian smiled and said, Speak, I'm listening. The human face hesitated for a moment before saying, Human, where did you get this sword? Yi Xian was about to speak when Xiao Ta suddenly said, I forged it. The human face was speechless. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 18:15. Hearing Xiao Ta's words, Yi Xian was a little speechless. This Xiao Ta was too shameless. Not far away, the human face said angrily, How can you, a broken tower, create such a sword that transcends the rules? Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta was instantly furious. You are a snob. I am the number 1 tower in the universe. My master is invincible. Invincible? The human face sneered. What a joke. In this world, even the Holy Venerable did not dare to say that he was invincible. Moreover, even if your master is invincible, what does that have to do with you? Xiao Ta said, My master is invincible, that means I am invincible. Understand? Yi Xian was speechless. The human face stared at Xiao Ta. You are so shameless. How can you say such things? Xiao Ta was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Fire Lord of the Stars, you said that Xiao An is a great sage, so why did she become like this? After a moment of silence, the Fire Lord of the Stars said, Because of some special reasons. Yi Xian asked, What special reasons? The Fire Lord of the Stars glanced at Yi Xian. Ordinary, with that, he glanced at the sword in Yi Xian's hand and changed his wording. Human, there are some things that you are better off not knowing. Because it is not a level that you can reach now. After that, he paused and said, I am doing this for your own good. Yi Xian smiled. It seems that your background is really not ordinary. The Fire Lord of the Stars said proudly, of course. We are the earliest ancient gods in this universe. The real ancient gods, the kind that have broken away from the mortal body. Yi Xian smiled. Do you know the supreme laws of the universe? The Fire Lord of the Stars shook his head. No. Yi Xian was silent. It seemed that this guy in front of him was not from the same era as the supreme laws. At the thought of this, Yi Xian could not help but glance at Shaoan beside him. The person he had randomly saved actually had such a powerful background. Shaoan was clearly a big shot. At this time, Shaoan suddenly grabbed Yi Xian's hand and said softly, Big brother Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, Don't worry, I'm here. Shaoan looked up at Yi Xian. After a while, she smiled. Before this moment, she was at a loss and uneasy. But at this moment, after hearing Yi Xian's words, she felt very safe. In the distance, the Fire Lord of Stars suddenly said, Human, you. Yi Xian suddenly interrupted the Fire Lord of Heaven's words, Your IQ is really low. Fire Lord flew into a rage. What do you mean by this? Yi Xian waved the Qingxian sword in his hand. Is there anyone in your era that can compare with this sword? The Fire Lord of Stars glanced at the Qingxian sword in Yi Xian's hand, his expression extremely ugly. Yi Xian smiled and said, Seems like there isn't anyone. After a moment of silence, the Fire Lord of Stars said, Human, who made this sword? Yi Xian pointed at himself. Me. Xiao Ta was speechless. The Fire Lord of Stars looked at Yi Xian. I finally understand why that stupid tower is so shameless. It turns out that if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Yi Xian was speechless. The Fire Lord of Stars said again, Human, I have long seen through your capabilities. With your current level, it is impossible for you to make this sword. Yi Xian smiled and said, Let's not talk about this. I just want to know why you and Shaoan became like this. The Fire Lord of Stars said in a deep voice, Human, knowing some things is not good for you. Yi Xian looked at the Fire Lord of Stars and said, If it wasn't for Shaoan's face, would have crushed you with one sword. Don't talk to me about gods or not, I, Yi Xian, do not worship gods. As for you, I hope you can correct your attitude because my patience has a limit. If there is a next time, I will crush your soul. Hearing this, the Fire Lord of Stars' expression suddenly became somewhat ugly. At this time, Yi Xian's left thumb was already on the sword hilt. The Fire Lord of Stars looked at Yi Xian, but Yi Xian's expression was very calm, without any killing intent. But he knew that if he refuted, this human in front of him would not hesitate to kill him. After a moment of silence, the Fire Lord of Stars said, Rebellion. Yi Xian frowned slightly, Rebellion? The Fire Lord of Stars nodded, If there are gods, then there are demons. Yi Xian said, You lost? The Fire Lord of Stars' expression became ferocious. Under normal circumstances, why would we be afraid of those ancient demons? It's just that we never thought that there would be traitors among us. Traitors. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian asked again, Where are you? The Fire Lord of Stars said, Ancient God World. Yi Xian said, Is it far from here? The Fire Lord of Stars said, Very, very far. Moreover, the people of this universe cannot reach where we are. Because the people here are still limited by space-time, but where we are, we have already surpassed space-time. It can be said that if they do not jump out of the circle of space-time, they will never be able to reach where we are. Yi Xian nodded, I understand. Saying this, he turned to look at Shaoan, You will follow me from now on. Shaoan nodded quickly, Okay. The Fire Lord of Stars said quickly, Human, the Holy Venerable wants to kill his way back to the ancient God world. Yi Xian said indifferently, Kill his way back to the ancient God world like this? Are you out of your mind? The Fire Lord of Stars still wanted to say something, but Shaoan suddenly said, You said you are my subordinate? The Fire Lord of Stars nodded quickly, yes. Shaoan said, Then what I say, will you listen to me? The Fire Lord of Stars smiled bitterly, of course. Shaoan looked at the Fire Lord of Stars, From now on, you have to respect Big Brother Yi Xian. The Fire Lord of Stars glanced at Yi Xian. He was about to speak when Shaoan said, Do you have any questions? The Fire Lord of Stars was silent for a moment, then said, This subordinate has no questions. It's just. Holy Venerable, forgive me for saying too much, but if he is with you, he will kill himself. He is not on the same level as us. Shut up. Shaoan suddenly interrupted the Fire Lord of Stars' words. The Fire Lord of Stars was startled and quickly lowered his head. Holy Venerable, Shaoan stared at the Fire Lord of Stars. I don't know how strong we used to be, but I know that the current us does not have the qualifications to be arrogant in front of Big Brother Yi Xian. When we don't have strength, shouldn't we put away our arrogance? Hearing this, Yi Xian could not help but look at Shaoan, sighing in his heart. This Shaoan was really not ordinary. But that's right, he's a super big shot after all. After a moment of silence, the Fire Lord of Stars bowed slightly. This subordinate understands. Shaoan nodded slightly. You just told me that in my previous life, I was, the Fire Lord of Stars said, not in your previous life. Holy Venerable, you just sealed your own memory and strength. Shaoan said in a deep voice, Is it to avoid those demons? The Fire Lord of Stars nodded, yes. After a long silence, Shaoan turned to look at Yi Xian. Big Brother Yi Xian, if you let me follow you, then in the future, I may implicate you. Yi Xian was silent. As Shaoan said, if he brought her along, there would be a lot of trouble in the future. Shaoan tightly held Yi Xian's hand, a little nervous. After a moment, Yi Xian smiled and said, Before you recover your memory, you are my sister. And after you recover your memory, we will talk about it at that time. What do you say? Shaoan quickly nodded. Yi Xian laughed, Then you can stay in the tower first. This place is isolated from the outside world, very safe. Shaoan nodded, okay. After a moment, Yi Xian came to a quiet place. He decided to open the sword imprint left by his big brother. As soon as he opened it, countless information poured into his mind. After a moment, Yi Xian's mouth slightly raised. It was a sword skill. The sword skill was, seeking death. This sword skill was seeking death. This was a sword skill left by his big brother. The core of this sword skill was seeking death. With this sword, I beg you to let me die. After careful study, Yi Xian found that it was not so much a sword technique as a belief in the doctrine of the sword. Seeking death. At this moment, he felt the loneliness of his big brother. Being invincible was really a kind of loneliness. There were two opponents, but they could not fight for the time being. Very lonely, very painful. This sword skill, seeking death, had two cores, one was attitude, the other was momentum. It was very difficult to learn. It was the most difficult of the three sword skills to learn. Because only when one was really seeking death could one unleash the true power of this sword skill. If one did not have the desire to die, the power of this sword skill was really ordinary. And if one had the desire to die, the power of this sword skill had no upper limit. The stronger the desire to die, the more powerful this sword skill was. Yi Xian sighed softly. This sword skill was used in desperate situations. Because under normal circumstances, who would have the desire to die? He was not his big brother, who wanted to be killed every day. In other words, this sword skill was most likely to be used in desperate situations. That kind of desperate situation where one only wanted to die. Of course, he did not want to have such a situation, but he still had to cultivate, in case there was a time when it would be useful. In the following time, Yi Xian began to concentrate on studying this sword skill. Anyway, in this Xiao Ta, there was enough time. While Yi Xian was cultivating God's graveyard was not idle either. God's graveyard used all its strength to search for the woman in the plain dress. Anyone who provided any information about the woman in the plain dress would be severely injured. Other than that, God's graveyard's internal information system was activated, and they began to search for the woman in the plain dress. After searching for an entire half a month, they'd finally found information about the woman in a simple dress. God's graveyard. A silhouette landed in front of a graveyard, bowed respectfully, and said excitedly, "Senior Yu, we have news about the woman in the plain dress." There was news. As soon as he finished speaking, the tombs suddenly trembled, and then Venerable Yu walked out. Senior Yu looked at the silhouette. "News about the woman?" The silhouette nodded, "Yes." Senior Yu closed his eyes slowly, and a smile appeared on his face. "Yi Xian, your good days are over. P.S. Asking for votes. Asking for votes. Asking for votes." Chapter 18:16. Lord Yu withdrew his gaze and said, "Where is the woman?" The shadow said in a deep voice, "She is a little far from here. She appeared in the faraway Nightmare Star realm." Venerable Yu frowned. "Nightmare Galaxy?" The phantom nodded. "Yes." Venerable Yu said solemnly, "So far. Nightmare Galaxy realm." It was a place very, very far away from here. They had only heard of it, but had never been there. Because it was too far. Although the graveyard of the gods was powerful, they did not have the ambition to unify the entire universe. Thus, they were somewhat unfamiliar with the other parts of the universe. Nightmare Galaxy realm. Venerable Yu said after a moment of silence, "Send someone to the Nightmare Galaxy, we must capture this woman." The phantom bowed slightly, "Understood." With that, he was about to leave when a voice suddenly sounded from the side. "Wait." The two of them turned around and saw the Left Hall Master slowly walking over. Left Hall Master looked at Left Hall Master Yu. "To ensure that nothing goes wrong, you have to go personally." Venerable Yu thought about it and nodded, "All right." The Left Hall Master said, "Yi Xian isn't a simple person. His sister shouldn't be a weakling either. Don't be careless and underestimate her. Be careful not to fail miserably." Venerable Yu nodded, "Of course." The Left Hall Master continued, "That's right. What is Yi Xian doing now?" The figure said, "He is in closed-door cultivation." After a moment of silence, the Left Hall Master said, "Venerable Yu, you must be quick. We can't give Yi Xian too much time. His rate of growth is too terrifying." Venerable Yu nodded, "Understood." With that, he turned around and walked into the splendid hall. Not long after, he asked for another wooden token. Because of the restriction of the laws outside, he needed the help of a supreme being to get out. Before long, Venerable Yu led a group of experts from the graveyard of gods and headed straight for the Nightmare Galaxy. At this moment, Yi Xian still didn't know that the people from the graveyard of the gods had gone looking for Qing'er. At this moment, he was still crazily cultivating his sword, seeking death. The more he cultivated, the more he found this sword skill interesting. One sword seeking death. Putting everything else aside, this sword skill sounded very domineering. When fighting with others, he would shout, "One sword seeking death." He could suppress his opponent with his aura alone. While he was cultivating, the Fire Lord of the North had been helping Shaoan recover her memories every day. Shaoan didn't object because she didn't want to be a useless person. As for Yi Xian, the Fire Lord of God was much more polite now because he realized that not only was Yi Xian's sword extraordinary, but Xiao Ta was also extraordinary. It was completely different from the space-time outside. This was a little terrifying. Under normal circumstances, such a divine object should not exist in such a place. Therefore, he was quite curious about Yi Xian's background. Time passed bit by bit, and in the blink of an eye, several years had passed. In the past few years, Yi Xian had improved greatly in all aspects, especially his sword skills. It could be said that he had already stacked draw a sword to determine life and death from 820 to 880. This was his current limit. The only way to reach 1000 was to become a minor saint. Now, he had just stabilized his realm and didn't want to become a minor saint. It wasn't a good thing to increase one's cultivation realm too quickly. More haste, less speed. Besides draw sword to determine life and death, his head lift technique had improved greatly as well. In terms of speed and power, it was at least 3 times stronger than before. In the past, his flying sword technique couldn't pose any real threat to ancient god realm experts. But now, his flying sword could pose a lethal threat to ancient god realm experts. All in all, his current strength had taken a qualitative leap compared to before. Ancient god realm experts weren't a threat to him anymore. Of course, his goal wasn't ancient god realm experts anymore. Yi Xian left Xiao Ta and went to the pavilion. As soon as he arrived, the pavilion master appeared before him. The pavilion master spoke in a low voice, "Brother Yi, I've received news that your sister seems to have been found in the god's graveyard." Yi Xian was stunned. "You found Qing?" The pavilion master nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, "How amazing." The pavilion master was speechless. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He really hadn't expected that he would actually find Qing in the god's graveyard. Needless to say, it was truly amazing. Because even he couldn't contact Qing He hadn't expected that he would actually find her in the god's graveyard. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Where?" The pavilion master spoke in a low voice, "In the distant Nightmare Starfield." Nightmare Starfield. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. "I've never heard of it." The pavilion master laughed bitterly. "It's very, very far away. For us, it's a completely foreign star domain." Yi Xian smiled. "Give me an address." The pavilion master frowned slightly. "You're going to rescue your sister?" Yi Xian blinked and said, "Yes. I'm going to rescue my sister." Xiao Ta was speechless. Xiao Lu's house lord said solemnly, "Brother Yi, the one going this time might be an ancient god realm master." Yi Xian frowned. "Only one?" The pavilion master was shocked. "One, isn't that enough?" Yi Xian muttered softly. "Why don't they send a few more?" When the pavilion master heard Yi Xian's words, he was completely dumbfounded. "Brother Yi, you want them to send more ancient god?" Yi Xian blinked and then smiled. "Of course not." Saying so, he stood up and said, "Pavilion master, give me the address of the Nightmare Starfield. I need to hurry and rescue my sister. I'm afraid I'll be too late. My sister's life is in danger." Xiao Ta was speechless. The pavilion master nodded. "Indeed." Saying so, he pointed a finger and a white light entered Yi Xian's forehead. Soon, a lot of information entered Yi Xian's mind. At the side, the pavilion master said, "Brother Yi, you have to hurry. Otherwise, your sister's life is in danger. An ancient god realm master is no joke." Yi Xian quickly nodded. "Yes, yes. Goodbye, pavilion master." Saying so, he turned and flew on his sword. The pavilion master looked at the horizon. After a long time, he said softly, "If the god's graveyard really captures Brother Ye's sister, then Brother Ye's situation." Saying so, deep worry appeared in his eyes. This time, the god's graveyard had paid a huge price to find Yi Xian's sister. The enemy would definitely capture Yi Xian's sister at all costs and use her to threaten Yi Xian. At that time, Yi Xian's situation would become extremely difficult. After leaving the pavilion, Yi Xian used the profound azure sword to travel through time and space to the Nightmare Starfield. In fact, Yi Xian was also a little excited. Qing. He also wanted to see Qing. He hadn't seen her for a long time. He wondered how she was doing now. His longing grew stronger and stronger. Inside Xiao Ta's house, Xiaoan was walking slowly by a river. Beside her was the Fire Lord of the North. Although Fire Lord didn't particularly like Yi Xian and Xiao Ta, he still respected Shaoan very much. Shaoan suddenly said, "Fire Lord, I've been feeling a little uneasy lately." "Why?" Fire Lord's expression changed. "Holy Venerable, you really feel a little uneasy?" Shaoan nodded. "Yes. I even feel a little flustered sometimes." Fire Lord's expression turned ugly. "Could it be that the ancient devil and the others have found us?" "It shouldn't be. This place is so far from the ancient devil realm. It's impossible for them to find this place." Shaoan said in a low voice, "I also don't know why I feel this way." Fire Lord hesitated for a moment and then said, "Holy Venerable, you still can't recover all your memories?" Shaoan shook her head. "There are some fragmented memories in my mind, but they are very messy. I can't gather them all." Fire Lord sighed. "It must be the sequela of that year." Shaoan smiled. "Was I defeated that year?" Fire Lord said angrily, "How is that possible? If you hadn't been ambushed by your own people, how could you have lost to that ancient devil?" Then, his expression turned ferocious. "It's all that damn bitch's fault. She actually ambushed Holy Venerable. Otherwise, we wouldn't have lost that year." Shaoan chuckled. "That's still a loss." Fire Lord hurriedly said, "No, if it was a one-on-one fight, even the ancient devil realm's #1 devil might not be able to defeat Holy Venerable. It's all that bitch's fault. She failed to live up to Holy Venerable's trust." Shaoan looked at Fire Lord. "Who is this she you speak of?" After a moment of silence, Fire Lord said, "Holy Venerable, one of your former subordinates. You trust her a lot. And you trust her the most." After a moment of silence, Shaoan said softly, "I understand." Fire Lord said fiercely, "When Holy Venerable recovers your memories, we will kill our way to the ancient god world and kill that woman with our own hands." Shaoan chuckled. "Let's talk about that later." Fire Lord said in a deep voice, "Holy Venerable, you have to stay away from that human." Shaoan was puzzled. "Why?" Fire Lord said in a deep voice, "You are a god, he is immortal." Shaoan shook his head. "Fire Lord, Brother Yi Xian is not simple." Fire Lord said, "It's his sword that is not simple. He is very ordinary." Shaoan asked, "If he was very ordinary, why would the sword recognize him as its master?" Fire Lord was silent. Shaoan smiled. "Brother Yi Xian is very good to his own people, but not to others. Fire Da, be more respectful to him in the future. Otherwise, even if Big Brother Yi Xian doesn't kill you, I won't let you off once I recover my memory." With that, she walked off into the distance. Fire Lord of the South smiled bitterly. In an unknown galaxy, Zun Yu led a group of gods' graveyard experts through space and time. Their destination was the Nightmare Starfield. Venerable Yu looked at the endless starfield in the distance. "Yi Xian, your doomsday is here." Beside him, an old man suddenly said, "What if that Yi Xian doesn't save his sister?" Master Yu sneered, "He will definitely save her. Because this person was very sentimental. This is his weakness." Chapter 18-17. An hour later, Venerable Yu's group entered Nightmare Starfield. After entering, Venerable Yu sized up the surroundings and asked, "Bai Yi, do you know anything about this place?" The old man called Bai Yi, who stood behind Venerable Yu, answered solemnly, "A little, but not much." Venerable Yu said, "Tell me." Bai Yi said solemnly, "There's a powerful force in this starfield, the White Chalk family, and they control the entire Nightmare Starfield. There's a special kind of spiritual energy here, the energy of life, and it's not inferior to the energy of eternal life." Venerable Yu asked, "Have you come into contact with them?" Bai Yi nodded, "I have. These fellows aren't very friendly." Venerable Yu fell silent for a moment. "Ignore them, our target is that plain-dressed woman." Bai Yi nodded and pointed ahead. "According to our scouts, that plain-dressed woman appeared in Martial Spirit City not long ago." Venerable Yu said, "Let's go." To Martial Spirit City. Right at this time, a powerful aura suddenly swept over from afar. Venerable Yu frowned, and it didn't take long for an old man to appear in front of him. The old man wore a gray robe, and his hands were hidden in his sleeves. Wrinkles crisscrossed on his face, and he looked very old. The old man's eyes narrowed. An ancient god realm expert. Venerable Yu nodded. This gray-robed old man wasn't an ancient god realm expert. Whether it was ancient god Starfield or nightmare Starfield, both were bound by the supreme laws of the universe. The old man stared fixedly at the gray-robed old man. Since you've stepped into the ancient god realm, why are you still able to appear in this world? Venerable Yu said indifferently, have you heard of God's graveyard? The old man frowned, God's graveyard? Venerable Yu nodded. The old man asked solemnly, what are you doing in Nightmare Starfield? Venerable Yu smiled, don't worry, we're here to look for someone, we have no other intentions. The old man's eyes were still slightly guarded, who are you looking for? Venerable Yu said, a woman in plain dress. As he spoke, he turned to look at Bai Yi. Bai Yi waved his right hand lightly, and a portrait of the woman appeared before them. Venerable Yu looked at the old man, do you know this person? The old man looked at the portrait of the woman in the plain dress. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head. I've never seen her before. Venerable Yu said in a low voice, this woman appeared in Lingwu City before. We are going to Lingwu City now. I hope you can help us. After a moment of silence, the old man said, all right. An ancient god realm master wasn't scary, what was scary was an ancient god realm master that could appear in this world. This meant that the other party must have received help from a supreme martial artist. Otherwise, there was no way he could have come out. Moreover, the graveyard of the gods was also a superpower. It would be beneficial to do them a favor. Under the old man's lead, the group arrived at Lingwu City. In front of the city gate, the old man said in a low voice, everyone, this spirit martial city is the capital of our nightmare tribe. Do not fight within the city. Venerable Yu smiled, of course. The old man nodded and led Venerable Yu and the others into the city. In the city, Venerable Yu turned and looked at Bei, search. White Knight nodded slightly, then disappeared with the experts of the graveyard of gods behind him. Venerable Yu looked at the old man. Just as he was about to speak, a voice came from the distance. An honored guest has arrived. Venerable Yu looked in the distance. Not far away, a middle-aged man was walking towards them. Beside Venerable Yu, the Nightmare Tribe's old man quickly introduced, Sir, this is our Nightmare Tribe's patriarch, Nightmare Abyss. Nightmare Abyss. Venerable Yu cupped his fists in greeting, Patriarch Nightmare Abyss. Nightmare Abyss nodded, I've heard of the graveyard of gods, but I've never been there. Venerable Yu smiled, Patriarch Nightmare Abyss, you don't visit without a reason. I'm here to look for a woman. Nightmare Abyss frowned, a woman? Venerable Yu nodded, that person has a grudge with our graveyard of gods, so she fled here. He cupped his fists in greeting, I humbly request Patriarch Nightmare Abyss's assistance. Nightmare Abyss fell silent for a moment, then looked at the old man beside him, Nightmare Forest, pass down my order, search for this woman. Nightmare Forest nodded, understood. With that, he turned and left. Nightmare Abyss looked at Venerable Yu, smiling, Venerable, how strong is this woman? Venerable Yu frowned, he really didn't know how strong that woman was. Nightmare Abyss looked at Venerable Yu, very strong? Venerable Yu smiled, no matter how strong she is, she's only a great saint. Nightmare Abyss nodded, that's true. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for an ancient god realm cultivator to appear outside. Since the woman was outside, there was only one explanation, she had not reached the ancient god realm. Venerable Yu added, although she's a great saint, don't underestimate her. Leader of the Nightmarish Abyss tribe, if your people find her, you must be careful. It's best if you come and inform me directly. Nightmare Abyss nodded, understood. He made an inviting gesture, Venerable, please enter the hall and rest for a while. I will inform Venerable when there's news. Venerable Yu nodded, then I'll have to trouble you. The group walked away. After Venerable Yu's group left, a man appeared on the street. This person was none other than Yi Xian, who had chased after them. With the azure profound sword, traveling through space was a walk in the park. Moreover, now that he knew the exact location of this place, he could come to this place at any time. Yi Xian looked around, then opened his palm, revealing the azure profound sword. Xiao Hun, can you feel Qing's aura? Xiao Hun fell silent for a moment, then answered, I can't. Yi Xian frowned, you can't feel it either? Xiao Hun answered, I can't. Yi Xian's voice was solemn, is it because Qing isn't here? Xiao Hun answered, that's possible. Yi Xian looked into the distance. The people in the tomb of God said that Qing appeared here, it shouldn't be false. As he spoke, he looked around and frowned slightly. Could it be that she has already left this place? Moreover, he didn't quite understand one thing. Didn't Qing, his father, and the others go to an unknown universe? Suddenly, Xiao Hun said excitedly, young lord, I can feel big sister Tianming's aura. Yi Xian hurried to ask, where is it? Xiao Hun suddenly pointed to the right, over there. Yi Xian grabbed Xiao Hun, then vanished on the spot. Almost at the same time, Venerable Yu suddenly stood up, found her. With that, he led the experts of the Tomb of Gods in the hall and vanished on the spot. The nightmare abyss hesitated for a moment, then followed them out. Somewhere in the sky, Yi Xian was flying on his sword, and he was very excited. Qing. I can finally see Qing. Right at this moment, a horrifying aura suddenly swept over from his right. Yi Xian turned to look, and it was Venerable Yu and the others. Seeing Yi Xian, Venerable Yu was slightly stunned, then he narrowed his eyes, Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly said fiercely, Venerable Yu, you always target me and my sister. What kind of man are you? Venerable Yu laughed, Yi Xian, it seems you care about your sister a lot. Yi Xian stared at Venerable Yu, Venerable Yu, you are an ancient god realm expert, don't you think it's beneath you to act like this? Venerable Yu shook his head, Yi Xian, you forced me to do this. If I didn't capture your sister, would you have obediently given in? Yi Xian said solemnly, I won't let you succeed. Venerable Yu laughed, that's not up to you. Ha! Venerable Yu increased his speed. He didn't choose to attack Yi Xian because he knew that even if Yi Xian couldn't defeat them, if Yi Xian wanted to escape, they wouldn't be able to stop him even if they joined hands. Thus, he had to capture Yi Xian's sister first. As Venerable Yu and the others increased their speed, Yi Xian also increased his speed. Shortly after, everyone arrived at the foot of a mountain, and the malevolent abyss appeared before Venerable Yu and the rest. The nightmare abyss looked at Venerable Yu with a faint smile, Venerable, if there's anything you need, just say the word. Behind him were more than a dozen great sage realm super experts. On the side, Yi Xian glanced at the nightmare abyss, not saying a word. Venerable Yu smiled, many thanks. He looked at the top of the mountain, and in the next moment, he appeared at the top of the mountain. At the same time, everyone else also appeared. At the top of the mountain was a small grass hut, and two people were sitting in front of it. A woman and an old man. The old man had white hair and an extremely aged face, and it was unknown how long he had lived. The woman was the woman in a plain dress. A chessboard was placed before them. Yi Xian smiled when he saw the woman in a plain dress. It really is Qing. But it didn't take long for Yi Xian to frown because he noticed that the Qing before him wasn't her real body. It was just a clone. At this moment, Qing, who was in the distance, suddenly turned around. She threw Yi Xian a look and smiled. Brother. Yi Xian walked towards Qing and wanted to ask her about it. Meanwhile, Venerable Yu appeared near Qing and opened his palm, and two pieces of paper suddenly floated into the air. Divine paper. The two pieces of paper turned blood red as soon as they floated in the air, and then an extremely terrifying force appeared in the surroundings. Yi Xian frowned. These two pieces of paper are much more terrifying than the ones that Venerable Yu took out earlier. The treasures in the graveyard of the gods were truly extraordinary. The woman in the plain dress glanced at the 2 pieces of paper that had turned blood red. Her expression was calm. At this time, Venerable Yu looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Yi Xian, do you know what this is? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. Venerable Yu said, this is a godly paper from the ancient times. It was used by God Emperor. Not only does it contain the supreme Tao, it also has a strand of godly power. True divine power. If an ancient God Realm Master were to act, this paper could easily kill an ancient God Realm Master. As he spoke, he smiled faintly. Yi Xian, as long as I move my mind, your sister will be incinerated into nothingness on the spot. Let me ask you, are you afraid or not? Yi Xian glanced at Venerable Yu. I'm so scared. I've never been so scared before. P.S. Horse at the end of last month. Vote for me if you still have tickets. The top 10 would get 1,000 yuan prize. To me, this is a huge fortune. Please. Chapter 1818. Venerable Yu couldn't help but roar with laughter when he heard Yi Xian. Just as he expected, Yi Xian really was a loyal person. So long as he used his sister as a hostage, Yi Xian would definitely give in. I can finally deal with this troublesome fellow. Right at this moment, the white-haired old man suddenly said, this paper seems to be mine. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the surroundings looked at the white-haired old man. Venerable Yu looked at the old man as well. He sized the old man up but couldn't see through him, so he frowned. Who are you? The old man grinned. You're using the paper I left behind, yet you're asking me who I am. Venerable Yu was stunned, and then he ridiculed, your paper? The old man nodded. It is indeed mine. Venerable Yu roared with laughter. How laughable. Do you know that this paper was left behind by a true God Emperor? What? Are you the God Emperor? The old man frowned slightly and replied with a question. Why can't I be the God Emperor? Venerable Yu was stunned, and then he roared with laughter. The old man was quite speechless. Meanwhile, the Nightmare Abyss spoke abruptly. You said you're the God Emperor? The old man glanced at the Nightmare Abyss. What? The Nightmare Abyss smiled. According to my knowledge, there isn't a God Emperor in this universe anymore. The old man stroked his beard and smiled. There is, but all of you can't come into contact with him. The Nightmare Abyss was about to speak when Venerable Yu spoke abruptly. How absurd. A God Emperor hasn't appeared in this universe for hundreds of thousands of years, yet you're actually saying that you're the God Emperor? Isn't that too laughable? The old man shook his head and sighed. Junior, I noticed that your forehead is dark and there's a ferocious aura between your brows. I'm afraid you won't live long. Yet you're still laughing here. The old man is speechless. Venerable Yu smiled. I won't live long? The old man nodded. Yes. Venerable Yu roared with laughter. Besides those exalts, who else in this world can kill me? The white-haired old man sighed softly. Why is your generation so stupid? Venerable Yu stared at the white-haired elder. Will you die if you don't act? As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve, and a powerful force swept towards the white-haired old man. However, before that force could approach the white-haired old man, it disappeared without a trace. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed when they witnessed this scene. Including Venerable Yu. He wasn't an idiot. The moment his power disappeared without a trace, he knew that something was wrong. Sovereign Yu hesitated for a moment and said, Senior, I offended you just now. The white-haired old man laughed and said, You're not hopelessly stupid. Venerable Yu said solemnly, Qian Bei, the target of our god's graveyard is this woman. We have no intention of offending you. The white-haired old man fell silent for a moment before he said, I take back what I said just now. Zun Yu, the white-haired old man looked at the plain-dressed woman in front of him. Senior, I've lost this game of chess. Senior? Hearing the white-haired old man's words, Venerable Yu was stunned. Why did he address her as senior? She glanced at the white-haired old man. Since you've lost, then die. The white-haired old man laughed bitterly. Senior, I don't want to die. The woman's face remained emotionless. It was you who came looking for me. The white-haired old man's smile grew even more bitter. I didn't know that Senior was so strong. The woman in the plain dress waved her hand slightly, and the chessboard in front of her disappeared. She turned around to look at Yi Xian, who was not far away. I was going to look for you with this doppelganger as soon as I finished this. I didn't expect you to come to me. A clone. Venerable Yu's expression instantly changed when he heard her. You're just a clone. He wasn't able to discern her true strength at all. The reason Yi Xian was able to discern her true strength was because he was truly too familiar with Qing. But this Qing gave him a slightly different feeling. Of course, while it was just a clone, it was still Qing. The woman paid no attention to Venerable Yu and walked towards Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Venerable Yu spoke ferociously, "You're courting death." As soon as he finished speaking, he chanted in his heart. In an instant, the two blood-red pieces of paper in the sky started burning. At the same time, two rays of red light enveloped the woman, but she was completely unharmed. She raised her head and glanced at the two pieces of paper. In the next moment, they shook violently and vanished into nothingness. Venerable Yu's face instantly turned pale when he witnessed this scene, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. How could this be possible? The white-haired old man shook his head and sighed, "My God! Who gave you the courage to do that?" The woman suddenly looked towards Nightmare Abyss, and his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly bowed respectfully, "Senior, I have nothing to do with the god's tomb. I'm just passing by. He wasn't stupid, and he'd naturally noticed how terrifying the woman was. Venerable Yu was an ancient god realm expert. Moreover, he'd even activated a divine artifact, but the woman was completely unharmed. What did this mean? It meant that she was far stronger than an ancient god realm expert. The woman looked at Yi Xian. "Do you recognize him?" Yi Xian glanced at Nightmare Abyss and shook his head. "I don't." He paused for a moment before continuing. "He just said that he's willing to help the god's tomb eliminate me." The woman's brows raised slightly. "Is that so?" As she spoke, she glanced at the Nightmare Abyss. "Kill my brother?" Nightmare Abyss spoke solemnly. "Senior, my Nightmare tribe has nothing to do with the god's tomb. My Nightmare tribe will no longer interfere in the matter between Senior and the god's tomb. Farewell." He turned around and left as soon as he finished speaking. But at this moment, something strange happened. Hiss! Before anyone could react, a sword pierced through Nightmare Abyss's forehead. Everyone present was stunned. The woman looked at Nightmare Abyss. "Did I say you could leave?" Nightmare Abyss's voice trembled. "Senior, leave a way out, and we'll meet again in the future." The woman shook her head. "I'll kill anyone who harbors ill intent towards my brother." She waved her hand lightly as soon as she finished speaking. Bang! Nightmare Abyss's entire body was obliterated. He completely vanished from this world. The expressions of the experts from the Nightmare tribe changed drastically, and one of them said angrily, "Aren't you going too far?" The woman looked at the old man. "You're not satisfied?" The old man said angrily, "My Nightmare tribe has a supremacy backing them as well." Supremacy? The woman frowned slightly. "What kind of trash is that?" Everyone was speechless. The old man stared fixedly at the woman. "How dare you look down on a supremacy?" The woman shook her head. "Call him over?" The old man said angrily, "What ability do you have to make a supremacy act against you?" "You." His head flew into the air, and his voice stopped abruptly. It wasn't the woman who attacked, but Yi Xian. The woman looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian smiled. "This is a sword technique that I created." "Qing, what do you think?" The woman hesitated for a moment, and then she said, "Not bad." Not bad. These words were obviously not true. Yi Xian laughed. "Qing, let's talk somewhere else. Don't let them waste our time." Qing nodded. "All right." Right at this moment, one of the experts from the Nightmare tribe shouted angrily, "Don't leave if you have the guts." Yi Xian looked at the Nightmare Tribe expert. What do you want to do? The expert sneered. Do you dare to wait here for a moment? I'll go back and call for reinforcements. Yi Xian, on the other side, the white-haired old man shook his head. My God, this old man's IQ is so high that he's going to blind me. At this moment, the woman suddenly turned to look at the white-haired old man, who hurriedly said, Senior, I was rude before. Before meeting you, the old man had always thought that he had reached the peak of martial arts. But now that I've met you, I realize that I've been a frog in a well. The woman looked at the white-haired old man. Whether I kill you or not depends on my brother. The white-haired old man hurriedly looked at Yi Xian and bowed slightly. Young friend, please put in a few good words for me. Yi Xian smiled faintly. I can't accept such a bow from you, senior. The white-haired old man laughed bitterly. Of course you can. Because my life and death are in your hands. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then said, I have no enmity with you, senior, so I naturally don't want you to die. Actually, he understood what Qing meant. Qing was creating an opportunity for him to make the old man owe him a favor. Otherwise, with Qing's personality, if he really wanted to kill this old man, he would have done so a long time ago. When he heard Yi Xian's words, Qing nodded slightly. Then I won't kill you. The white-haired old man instantly heaved a sigh of relief, and then he bowed once more. Thank you, senior, for not killing me. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. I'll definitely repay your kindness in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to leave. Meanwhile, Venerable Yu suddenly spoke with a trembling voice. Didn't you say that you're a god emperor? The white-haired old man gazed at Venerable Yu. Yes. Is there a problem? Venerable Yu was puzzled. If you really are a god emperor, then why are you so humble to her? The white-haired old man smiled. What do you think? Venerable Yu spoke furiously. You're not a god emperor. The white-haired old man opened his palm, and there was a piece of white paper there. He chanted a few words in his heart, and it didn't take long for the paper to start trembling. Gradually, a trace of extremely terrifying energy could be sensed within the paper. The energy of a god emperor. Venerable Yu felt like he'd been struck by a heavy blow, and his mind went blank. The white-haired old man smiled. Do you know why I'm still alive? It's not that I'm strong. There are many who are stronger and more talented than me. However, most of them were dead. The reason why I've come this far is because I've always remembered a principle. That is, as a person, no matter when, you can't be too arrogant. You must always leave some leeway. When it's time to be a coward, you must be a coward. There's nothing wrong with being humble. With that, he turned around and left. Chapter 18-19. When the white-haired old man left, his face was full of smiles. In fact, before meeting the plain-dressed woman, he had already started to feel complacent. Because in this universe, there was basically no one who could match him. But after meeting the plain-dressed woman, he once again emptied himself. The current him had undergone an earth-shattering change. He had a chance to climb to the next level. Today, he had been reborn from the ashes. In the distance, Venerable Yu seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly looked at the plain-dressed woman, staring fixedly at her. After calming down, he finally realized how extraordinary this woman was. Although it was only an avatar, the feeling this woman gave him was like the vast universe, unfathomable. She's stronger than God Emperor? The moment this thought appeared in his mind, Venerable Yu felt it was ridiculous. Was it possible? But if she wasn't stronger than God Emperor, why would God Emperor respect her so much? Gradually, Venerable Yu's face turned ugly. His rationality told him that this woman was definitely stronger than the white-haired old man. Right at this moment, an extremely terrifying pressure suddenly swept down from the sky. An ancient god realm master. Yi Xian raised his head and saw a shadow appear in the sky. The ancient god realm master of the Nightmare tribe had come out. But it wasn't his main body that had come. It was just a shadow. In the sky, the ancient god realm master looked down at the Qing below, don't you think you're a little too ruthless? The plain-dressed woman looked at the ancient god realm master. Who are you? The shadow answered, Nightmare Lin, the grand elder of the Nightmare tribe. The plain-dressed woman nodded. Where is the Nightmare tribe? This was the question she wanted to ask. The shadow stared at the plain-dressed woman, sneering. What, you want to annihilate my Nightmare tribe? The plain-dressed woman said, point me in a direction. The shadow pointed to the right. Go to Jianghu city, 1,000,000 li away. The plain-dressed woman opened her palm, revealing the profound azure sword. Go. The moment her voice fell, the profound azure sword flew out. In the sky above Jianghu city, the profound azure sword fell straight down. Boom! When the sword fell, the entire Jianghu city was wiped out. And at this moment, the green profound sword directly absorbed nearly 1,000,000 souls. Not far from Qing'er, the figure suddenly turned his head. In the next moment, his eyes were filled with disbelief. At this moment, he was disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Because his real body was gone. On the other side, Venerable Yu's eyes were filled with disbelief. At this moment, his heart was filled with fear. This woman had really annihilated the nightmares with a single slash. At this moment, he believed that the white-haired elder was God Emperor. He believed that this woman was even more terrifying than God Emperor. The reason why this woman could exist in this world was because she was stronger than a supreme being. The laws of the universe could not bind her at all. The graveyard of the gods was finished. Venerable Yu's face was pale. Qing'er glanced at the illusory figure of the nightmarish tribe. She opened her palm, and the Qingxian sword appeared in her hand. The sword's aura began to surge madly. In that split second, she absorbed the souls of more than 10 ancient god realm masters, and the number of masters below the ancient god realm was uncountable. What a windfall! The illusory figure stared at Qing'er with a vicious expression. You annihilated my nightmarish tribe with a single thought. You will be punished by the heavens for your actions. At this moment, Venerable Yu suddenly said softly, the heavens cannot punish her. This kind of expert had surpassed the supreme laws of the universe. How could the heavens punish her? The woman in the plain dress pulled Yi Xian's hand and turned to walk away. The illusory figure suddenly roared in anger, I curse you to die a horrible death. Qing'er stopped abruptly and turned to look at the illusory figure. If curses work, why do we still cultivate? The illusory figure wanted to say something else, but Qing'er waved her hand and turned him into nothingness. The nightmarish tribe had completely disappeared from this world. Qing'er turned to look at Venerable Yu. Qing'er suddenly waved her sleeves. Boom! Venerable Yu and the others were wiped out in an instant. Killed in an instant. She didn't even give them a chance to speak. Qing'er pulled Yi Xian away. Along the way, Qing'er suddenly asked, Are you wondering why I'm here? Yi Xian nodded, yes. Qing said, If you hadn't come, I would have killed that old man. Yi Xian didn't understand, why? Qing said, He's already half a step out of this universe. He's a huge threat to you. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, So you want to kill him? Qing looked at Yi Xian, yes. Yi Xian smiled bitterly, Qing'er, you don't have to do this. Let me walk the rest of the way alone. If I really can't win, you can help me. How about that? Qing'er nodded after a moment of silence, all right. Yi Xian said softly, My goal is to surpass you, big brother and dad. So, let me walk the rest of the way alone. Qing said, Just surpass me. Yi Xian didn't understand, why? Qing said, Surpassing me means surpassing them. Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Qing'er, tell me honestly. Who's stronger, you, father, and big brother? In fact, he was really curious about Qing'er, dad, and big brother's strength. Out of the three, who was more powerful? Qing'er said calmly, Ask them next time. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Qing suddenly stopped moving. She raised her head to look towards the horizon and said softly, "My main body has already left this universe." Yi Xian said after a slight hesitation, "Is it very far?" Qing nodded. "As you are now, you can't leave this universe." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Qing blurted out, "Because it's weak." As she spoke, she hesitated for a moment before she said, "This universe is weak." Yi Xian, Qing turned to look at Yi Xian. "It's because I'm going to leave that I'm worried about you. That's why I left this avatar." Yi Xian said with a smile, "I am very strong now, too." Qing nodded, "Much stronger than before." Yi Xian smiled, "Don't worry, Qing, I'll take care of myself from now on." Qing smiled, "Good." As she spoke, she glanced into Yi Xian's body and said, "There seem to be two unfamiliar existences in the pagoda." Yi Xian was about to speak, but Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Big sister Tianming, there's a very arrogant fire in the tower. I said you're invincible, but he ridiculed me and said you can't be invincible." Yi Xian, meanwhile, Shaoan and Fire De appeared. Shaoan glanced at Qing, hesitated for a moment, and then bowed slightly, "Big sister." Fire De suddenly said, "Holy Venerable, what does she have to make you bow to her?" Meanwhile, Xiao Ta snickered, "This idiot Fire De is about to be taught a lesson." Qing glanced at Fire De, "What do I have to make her?" Fire De looked at Qing, "She's a holy venerable, and she's beyond mortals." "What about you?" Qing flicked her sleeve. Bang! A ray of sword energy pierced through Fire De, and in an instant, Fire De started vanishing at a visible speed. At this moment, Fire De was horrified, and his eyes were filled with terror. "You," Shaoan hurriedly bowed respectfully, "Big sister, please spare his life." Qing looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he smiled, "Qing, forget it. We're brother and sister, so let's not kill each other anymore." Qing nodded, and then she opened her palm. A ray of sword energy suddenly flew out from within Fire De's body, and then it fell firmly into Qing's palm. Qing glanced at Fire De, who was still in shock. The so-called gods of this world have only given themselves titles. Childish and laughable. Fire De spoke in a low voice, "Your strength is extraordinary, and I'm not a match for you. However, I'm not convinced that you look down on gods like this." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Fire De, Qing, doesn't need you to obey." Fire De said in a low voice, "You look down on gods like this because you've never seen a real god. A real god breaks away from the mortal body, and casts a divine body, godhead, and divine soul. That's something you can't even imagine." Yi Xian looked at Qing, "What is this divine body he's talking about?" Qing, was silent for a moment, and then she shook her head, "Too low level. I don't know." Yi Xian, Fire De said angrily, "Arrogant. Your Excellency, you're too arrogant. You don't even know what a divine body is, and you dare to look down on gods, you." Qing, suddenly looked at Shaoan, "She is the god you've been talking about, right?" Fire De said, "Yes." Qing, looked at Shaoan, and the latter was a little uneasy. "Big sister." Qing, walked to Shaoan, and she placed her right hand on his shoulder. Boom! In an instant, a powerful aura swept out from Xiao An's body. Xiao An's eyes widened, and in an instant, countless information rushed into her mind, and countless memory fragments began to condense. A moment later, the plain-dressed woman withdrew her right hand, and at this moment, Shaoan had undergone a tremendous change. Shaoan slowly closed her eyes, and half of her hair turned snow-white. Next to her, Fire De said in a trembling voice, "Holy Venerable, have you recovered your memory?" After a moment, Shaoan opened her eyes, and her gaze fell directly on the plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman said, "Attack! Attack!" Shaoan was silent. Next to her, Fire De suddenly said, "Holy Venerable, you really recovered your memory." Ha! Laughing, he suddenly looked at the plain-dressed woman. Holy Venerable, show her what a god is. She. Shaoan suddenly turned and slapped. Slap. Fire Da's voice stopped abruptly, and his face flew several hundred zhang away. Fire Da was stunned. Fire Da looked at Shaoan in disbelief. Holy Venerable, you hit the wrong person. Hit the woman in front of you. Shaoan glanced coldly at Hua Da and then at the plain-dressed woman. Please enlighten me. As she spoke, she opened her right hand. In an instant, the entire world actually started to disappear bit by bit. All things wither, including heaven and earth. P.S. Please vote. Chapter 1820. All things wither, including this world. Yi Xian took a deep look at Shaoan. After recovering his memories, Shaoan is more than terrifying. His strength is definitely not lower than the supreme laws of the universe. So many mysterious experts. In fact, as God Emperor said, there are many experts in this universe. However, without reaching a certain level of strength, one can't come into contact with that circle. One can't be complacent and conceited. Not far away, Qing suddenly opened her palm. An array of sword light flew out from her palm. In an instant, the world returned to normal. Seeing this, Shaoan's pupils suddenly constricted. The woman glanced at Shaoan, and then walked over to Yi Xian. She took Yi Xian's hand and walked towards the distance. Beside Shaoan, Hua Da suddenly said, Saint, this. Shaoan slowly closed his eyes. I lost. Hua Da frowned slightly. How is this possible? You. Shut up. Shaoan suddenly turned to look at Hua Da. From now on, I'll castrate you if you speak any more nonsense. Hua Da. On the other side, Qing took Yi Xian towards the mountains in the distance. Qing held Yi Xian's hand, and the two of them walked very slowly. Yi Xian suddenly said, Qing, what level of strength do I have to reach to jump out of this universe? Qing said, about 10 times stronger than that white-haired old man. Yi Xian, Qing turned to look at Yi Xian. It's not that easy to jump out of a universe. But I believe you can do it. Yi Xian smiled. I will definitely do it. Qing nodded. I will wait for you. After saying that, she paused and said, no matter how long it takes. Yi Xian's heart was filled with warmth. He held Qing's hand tightly. Just like that, the brother and sister slowly walked into the distance. About half an hour later, Qing suddenly stopped. I have to go. Yi Xian looked at Qing. Is this avatar going to disappear? Qing nodded. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, all right. Qing looked at Yi Xian and said softly, live well. You're my only motivation to live on. Without you, my life will become meaningless. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Qing do you not care about anyone else besides me? Qing shook her head. No. Yi Xian was silent. Qing gently stroked Yi Xian's cheek. If you can't keep up with me, then wait for me. Wait until I reach the end of this universe. Then I will come back for you. With that, her body became illusory. Yi Xian smiled. I want you to wait for me. Qing smiled, then I'll wait for you to come find me. Yi Xian said seriously, I won't let you wait too long. Qing nodded. All right. With that, she disappeared. She left just like that. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then, he said softly, wait for me. I can't let Qing down. Qing has sacrificed too much for me. Right at this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly sounded from the side. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and turned around. It was Shaoan. At this moment, Shaoan wasn't the same Shaoan from before. Shaoan gazed at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian said with a smile, are you leaving? Shaoan replied, soon. Yi Xian thought for a moment and asked, are you going back to take revenge? Shaoan shook her head. My current strength is far inferior to when I was overthrown. So, I need to recover my strength first. She paused for a moment and continued, I want to stay with Xiao Ta for a while longer. Yi Xian came to an understanding. Shaoan wants to use Xiao Ta to recover his strength. Indeed, there's no better place to cultivate than Xiao Ta. Shaoan glanced at Yi Xian. Can I? Yi Xian smiled. How long? Shaoan fell silent for a moment. I don't know. Yi Xian frowned. Are you badly injured? Shaoan nodded. A little. Yi Xian was slightly hesitant. Shaoan's background wasn't simple, and his opponent wasn't simple either. Even though he wasn't afraid of trouble, he didn't want to cause trouble for no reason. Shaoan continued. It won't take too long. I really need this bit of time. Yi Xian said with a smile, all right. Shaoan glanced at Yi Xian. Thank you. Yi Xian said, there's no need to thank me. Just keep fire virtue in check. No one will be able to protect him if he talks back to Qing, like this again. Shaoan nodded. Don't worry. He'll be fire virtue obediently in the future. Yi Xian blinked. Can I ask you if there's anything I don't understand? Shaoan replied, sure. Yi Xian asked, what realm are you at? Shaoan replied, the molded soul realm. Yi Xian's brows furrowed. The molded soul realm? Shaoan nodded. Above the ancient god realm is the molded body realm, and above the molded soul realm is the molded soul realm. Simply put, after reaching the ancient god realm, one can mold a divine body, a godhead, and a divine soul. Finally, one can break away from the mortal body and become a god. Become a god. Yi Xian asked solemnly, are you considered a god? Shaoan nodded. Yes. Yi Xian asked again, then what does Qing belong to? Shaoan asked, the senior just now. Yi Xian nodded. After a moment of silence, Shaoan answered, I don't know. Yi Xian was speechless. Shaoan looked at Yi Xian. I don't know what realm she has reached. At this moment, her heart was filled with shock. Even she couldn't sense what realm the plain-dressed woman had reached. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that even the terrifying Shaoan couldn't sense Qing, or strength. Shaoan said softly, her strength is beyond my understanding. Saying that, she slowly closed her eyes. In truth, she was extremely shocked at this moment. She was the top expert of her generation, and there was almost no one stronger than her. But she didn't expect that plain-dressed woman's strength to exceed her understanding. How terrifying was this? At this time, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Shaoan, stay with Xiao Ta and recuperate. Shaoan nodded, many thanks. Yi Xian smiled, you're welcome. Shaoan glanced at Yi Xian and nodded slightly, if there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me. Yi Xian said, of course. Shaoan nodded and turned to leave. Of course, she took Fire Da with her. After Shaoan left, Yi Xian opened his palm and the azure profound sword appeared in his hand. Yi Xian hastily asked, Xiao Han, have you broken through? Xiao Han answered excitedly, not yet. But I can break through at any time. Yi Xian said, then hurry up and break through. Xiao Han said, young lord, if I choose to break through, I might need to go into seclusion for a period of time. Yi Xian smiled, it's fine, go into seclusion. I can handle the matters outside. Xiao Han said, all right. Then young lord, take care. Yi Xian laughed heartily, all right. Xiao Han entered seclusion. This time, Xiao Han directly devoured more than 1,000,000 souls, including many ancient god realm masters. It could be said that Xiao Han really made a killing this time. And Yi Xian was also looking forward to the Azure Profound Sword's breakthrough. The current azure profound sword was already close to invincible. If it broke through again, how terrifying would it be? Without thinking too much, Yi Xian left Xiaota. He did not linger in Nightmare Starfield but returned to Azure Province. Time to have children. As for the God's Cemetery, he was not in a hurry. It was not too late to take revenge after having children. Having children was the most important thing. Otherwise, Tuoba Yen would be too lonely in Azure Province alone. God's Cemetery. In front of a tomb, the left hall master's face was extremely ugly because Venerable Yu's tomb had shattered. Shattered. This meant that Venerable Yu, who went out to search for the plain-dressed woman, was dead. Was he killed by the plain-dressed woman? The left hall master frowned, his eyes filled with doubt. With Venerable Yu's strength, unless the universal law intervened, no one could kill him. Could it be that the universal law intervened? With this thought in mind, the left hall master turned and left. A moment later, the left hall master arrived at the grand hall. He walked up to the statue of the female Venerable and bowed slightly. Venerable. The statue opened her eyes, and then the left hall master spoke in a low voice, Venerable Yu is dead. The woman frowned slightly, he's dead as well? The left hall master nodded, he's dead as well. It might have been the supreme law that did it. The woman's brows knit together even more tightly when she heard this. A short moment later, the woman said, if it really was her, then I'll kill Yi Xian myself. As soon as she finished speaking, she closed her eyes slowly, and the statue returned to normal. High up in the clouds, Fan Duo, who was teaching Dao Yi, suddenly raised her head because a woman was walking over slowly from afar. It was the Supreme Exalt, Tao Yi. Tao Yi walked over to Fan Duo, did you kill my subordinates? Fan Duo frowned slightly, I killed your subordinates? Tao Yi stared fixedly at Fan Duo, I've lost 2 ancient God Realm subordinates. Who else could it be but you? Fan Duo chuckled, Tao Yi, do you think I would make a move against 2 ancient God Realm ants? Tao Yi spoke coldly, both of them died because they targeted Yi Xian, and Yi Xian is one of your subordinates. Besides you, I can't think of anyone else who would kill them. Fan Duo thought for a moment and said, Tao Yi, I'm actually a little curious. There's no enmity between you and Yi Xian, so why do you keep trying to kill him? What's in it for you? Could it be because he's one of my subordinates? Tao Yi's expression was icy cold, you seem to be mistaken. It was your subordinates who killed my subordinates first. Fan Duo shook her head, there's no point in talking about that. As opponents of many years, I just want to give you a piece of advice. Don't offend that kid for no reason. If you have something against him, then target me. Really? Tao Yi walked over to Fan Duo and stared fixedly at her, the more you care about him, the more I want him dead. Fan Duo glanced at Tao Yi, and then she started laughing from extreme rage, I beg you to kill him. Quickly go kill him. If you don't kill him, I'll look down on you. Go quickly, I'll cheer for you. Tao Yi laughed. It seems that you really care about her. Seeing that you care about him so much, I'm really happy, really. Fan Duo was speechless. Chapter 1821. CE left. Whereas Fan Duo was speechless. She and CE could be considered archenemies, and they had never been on good terms. She didn't expect that CE would go after Yi Xian. Could that guy Yi Xian be targeted? Fan Duo shook her head. CE going after Yi Xian wasn't a bad thing for her. Because if CE provoked the plain-dressed woman, he would die without a doubt. However, she was worried that the plain-dressed woman was temperamental. If something really happened to Yi Xian, that woman would kill everyone here. At this time, Dao Yi suddenly said, Master, she seems to hate you a lot. Fan Duo nodded, I also hate her a lot. Dao Yi smiled faintly, can you tell me more? Fan Duo smiled, my master and her master belong to the same master, so we can be considered to be from the same sect. And her master died in my master's hands. Dao Yi asked, revenge for killing your master? Fan Duo nodded. Dao Yi's voice was soft, no wonder. Fan Duo walked to the side and looked down, speaking in a soft voice. 2 ancient god realm masters have fallen. I wonder if she was the one who made a move. Dao Yi suddenly asked, Master, how many supreme masters are there in this universe? Fan Duo answered, about 4. 4. Dao Yi nodded, looking pensive. Fan Duo suddenly said, that woman will probably go after him like crazy. Dao Yi did not reply. Fan Duo turned to Dao Yi, smiling, aren't you worried? Dao Yi softly said, shouldn't we be worried about her? Fan Duo blanked for a second, then smiled, indeed. As she said this, her expression suddenly changed. She turned around with disbelief in her eyes. Dao Yi asked, what's wrong? Fan Duo solemnly said, that woman has broken the laws below. Now, ancient god realm masters are no longer restricted. Dao Yi looked at Fan Duo, is she declaring war on you? Fan Duo nodded, you can say so. Dao Yi asked in a deep voice, will she deal with him personally? After a short moment of silence, Fan Duo said, I'll go hold her back. After saying that, she disappeared directly. Dao Yi remained silent, his eyes filled with worry. After staying in the Azure Prefecture for a few days, Yi Xian left the Azure Prefecture and headed for the Tomb of the Gods. Vengeance must be taken. In the gods' graveyard, the left hall stood in front of the statue of the woman. The statue looked down at the left hall. That woman is currently restraining my main body. I cannot come to this world. I have already broken the nomological power of this world. You can come and go as you please. The left hall master bowed slightly. Understood. The female statue looked at the left hall master. Don't disappoint me again. The left hall master said, definitely not. The statue slowly closed her eyes. The left hall master turned and left. As soon as he left the hall, he frowned. In the next moment, he disappeared on the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already in the graveyard. At this moment, Yi Xian was also there. Yi Xian had come looking for him of his own accord. The left hall master looked at Yi Xian. Unlike before, there was a solemn look in his eyes. The god's graveyard had already lost 2 ancient god realm experts. If he still looked down on Yi Xian, then he would truly be a fool. Moreover, Yi Xian had come to the god's graveyard of his own accord. There was definitely something fishy going on. Yi Xian smiled. You're looking for me? The left hall master glanced at Yi Xian. Did you kill Venerable Yu? Yi Xian smiled. Take a guess. A complicated look flashed through the left hall master's eyes. The stupidest thing we've ever done in the god's graveyard was to target you because of a small grotto heaven. However, we had no choice. The outside world is like an ant to us. We won't argue with an ant about right or wrong. Now, you have the right to argue with us, but it's already too late. Yi Xian nodded. It's indeed too late. Either you kill me, or I'll destroy you. The left hall master smiled. Come, Yi Xian. Let me see how monstrous you are. The space around the left hall master and Yi Xian suddenly changed. In the next moment, the two arrived in a deathly stillness in the starry sky. Space-time shift. The left hall master was about to make a move when Yi Xian suddenly said, "You can come out." The left hall master smiled. Yes. Yi Xian said solemnly, "As far as I know, there are restrictions outside. You can't come out as you please. However, Venerable Mu and Venerable Yu were able to come out. In other words, you have a supremacy helping you from behind." The left hall master nodded. Yes. Yi Xian smiled. So it was a supremacy who wanted to kill me. But I don't understand. When did I offend a supremacy? The left hall master looked at Yi Xian. Isn't the supremacy behind you the supreme law of the universe? Yi Xian frowned. Who told you that? The left hall master frowned as well. Isn't the person behind you the supreme law of the universe? Yi Xian smiled. If I'm not wrong, the supremacy behind you thinks I'm one of her people. That's why she made you go against me so desperately, right? The left hall master's expression suddenly turned ugly. Yi Xian wasn't a member of the supreme law? If he wasn't a member of the supreme law, then whose was Yi Xian's person? It was impossible for an ordinary person to nurture such a monstrous genius. At this moment, the left hall master really regretted it. Why did they have to provoke Yi Xian? Regardless of whether Yi Xian was a supremacy's person or not, they shouldn't have provoked him. It really wasn't worth it. Would there be any benefits in killing Yi Xian? No. If Yi Xian was just an ordinary person and killing him would make them feel better, then they would kill him. However, the problem was that Yi Xian wasn't an ordinary person. What a loss. Even if he went back on his word now, it would be meaningless. The supremacy had personally given the order to eliminate Yi Xian, so he couldn't possibly go against the supremacy's order. The left hall master collected his thoughts and looked at Yi Xian. Let's fight. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and a ball of black energy suddenly rose slowly from it. In the distance, Yi Xian smiled. He opened his palm, and the mausoleum of swords appeared in his hand. Then, he walked towards the left hall master. He walked very slowly, but he was very calm and confident. The left hall master stared fixedly at Yi Xian. A moment later, he suddenly slapped the ball of black energy in front of him. Boom! In an instant, the surrounding stars turned pitch black. Domain. It was a form of domain. As the star field turned pitch black, in the endless darkness, streams of terrifying devouring power surged towards Yi Xian like a tide. They were going to devour him. The devouring energy had even devoured the spatial energy in this area. Yi Xian suddenly stopped moving, and then he held the mausoleum of swords horizontally in front of him. Defend. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword domain appeared. The invincible sword domain. As soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, the devouring energy had stopped around 3 m away from Yi Xian. It couldn't enter. The area where Yi Xian resided was an invincible area. It was impenetrable by all techniques. Even the devouring energy was unable to corrode Yi Xian's sword domain. It was his strongest defense. The left hall master's expression became slightly unsightly when he witnessed this scene, the sword domain. Yi Xian smiled, yes. The left hall master asked, you created it yourself? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, my father taught me. Xiao Ta was slightly surprised. Why does this young master suddenly want to save face this time? The left hall master gazed at Yi Xian, who's your father? Yi Xian chuckled, a very formidable swordsman. The left hall master fell silent for a moment, and then he suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, a powerful force blasted towards Yi Xian. At this moment, the entire deathly silent starry sky started to die bit by bit. However, that force was still obstructed outside the sword domain. It couldn't advance an inch. Yi Xian was slightly shocked in his heart as he gazed at the left hall master. The sword domain was much more terrifying than he'd imagined. It really was the strongest defense. Even an ancient god realm expert like him was unable to break through his domain. How formidable. The left hall master retreated to his original position and stared fixedly at the area where Yi Xian was standing. Yi Xian's sword domain was far stronger than he'd imagined. Yi Xian suddenly laughed, come, take my sword. As soon as his voice fell, he vanished on the spot. In the distance, the left hall master's expression changed abruptly, and he punched out. With a single punch, a powerful fist aura instantly shattered the entire star field. Head on. It was a tit for tat. At this time, Yi Xian's sword arrived. Rumble. As a wave of sword light exploded, the left hall master retreated tens of thousands of zhang away. Sword draw to decide life and death. 880 overlapping sword draws to decide life and death. The left hall master's body started to vanish as soon as he stopped. One sword to shatter his body. The left hall master found it hard to believe. He raised his head to look at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian raised his finger lightly. Rise. Chi. Before the left hall master could react, his head flew into the air. One sword cut off his head. Instant kill. With a wave of his right hand, Yi Xian locked onto the left hall master's powerful soul with a sword light. This was a powerful soul that could nourish Xiao Hun. The left hall master's soul stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment, his heart was filled with fear. He had never imagined that he would be defeated so easily. Defeated so easily. Wasn't Yi Xian only at the spacetime realm? At this moment, the left hall master could sense that Yi Xian was indeed only at the spacetime realm. But why was his battle prowess so terrifying? There was no answer. Yi Xian did not waste any words. He directly sent the left hall master into Xiao Ta's body for Xiao Hun to absorb. In any case, for Xiao Hun, this kind of powerful soul was better than nothing. In the starry sky, Yi Xian looked at the mausoleum of swords in his hand, a faint smile on his face. The current Huang Xiaolong could easily kill an ancient god realm master without the profound azure sword. Invincible. Yi Xian suddenly laughed. At this moment, he felt invincible. Truly invincible. And this feeling was really a kind of loneliness. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly returned to Xiao Ta. He came before Xiaowen and said with a smile, Xiaowen, I have a defensive sword skill. Try attacking me. Xiaowen glanced at Yi Xian. Are you sure? Yi Xian laughed. Of course. As he spoke, he directly took out his sword domain. Invincible within the sword domain. Yi Xian looked at Xiaowen and said with a smile, come. Xiaowen thought for a moment, then disappeared on the spot. The next moment, boom. The sword domain instantly shattered. Yi Xian's entire body was instantly sent flying several tens of thousands of zhang away, finally smashing heavily into a mountain. Among the rubble, Yi Xian continuously spat out blood. His eyes were somewhat dazed. I don't want to cultivate anymore. I don't want to cultivate anymore. What's the point of cultivating hard? Chapter 1822. Defeated in one move. At this moment, Yi Xian was a little shocked. What happened to being invincible? Invincible? His confidence of being invincible vanished at this moment. Xiaowen walked in front of Yi Xian and pulled Yi Xian up. Yi Xian looked at Xiaowen, how much strength did you use just now? Xiaowen thought for a moment and said, 30%, 30%. Yi Xian lay down again. Don't pull me. I'll lie down for a while. Xiaowen was speechless. 30%. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Xiaowen had only used 30% of her strength and almost killed him. If she had used a little more, would he still have a chance to live? Moreover, Xiaowen was not at her peak. What happened to the invincible sword domain? Yi Xian shook his head with a bitter smile. Xiaowen sat next to Yi Xian and said softly, your sword technique is very strong. Yi Xian turned to look at Xiaowen. Xiaowen looked at Yi Xian. Very strong. She said it very seriously. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. But I can't even take 30% of your strength. Xiaowen said softly, I've been cultivating for at least 1,000,000 years. 1,000,000 years. Yi Xian fell silent. Xiaowen continued, the reason why you find it unbelievable is because you haven't taken my strength seriously. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Indeed. In his opinion, his current strength should be the kind that would not be weak against anyone except for the 3 swords. However, the cruel reality told him that he was still far from it. Xiaowen glanced at Yi Xian. These sword techniques of yours have endless potential. Cultivate them well because the current you is still unable to unleash their true power. After saying that, she got up and walked into the distance. Yi Xian also got up and left after a moment of silence. Of course, he would not be defeated. On the contrary, he was a little happy. Because failure would allow him to discover his own shortcomings. He still had a long way to go. On the other side, Fire Do was beside Shaoan. He said, "Holy Venerable, the person behind this guy is so strong. Should we use him to deal with Ancient Devil?" Shaoan suddenly turned around and slapped him. Pa! The fire virtue was sent flying. Fire Da was dumbfounded. Shaoan coldly glanced at Fire Da and said, "If he treats me with sincerity, I will treat him with sincerity." With that, he quickly disappeared into the distance. Hua Da felt a little wronged. Xiao Ta suddenly appeared in front of Fire Da. "You were beaten again? TSK. Does it hurt?" Fire Da, very soon, one tower and one fire started fighting again. Yi Xian had returned to the graveyard of the gods. Naturally, he would not give up so easily. The graveyard of the exterminating gods. Yi Xian arrived at the graveyard. There were tens of thousands of tombs in the graveyard. Looking at the tombs, Yi Xian thought, "Damn, don't tell me they're all ancient god realm masters." At this time, Yi Xian suddenly turned around. Not far behind him stood an old man. The old man was staring at him. Yi Xian sized up the old man. This old man was also an ancient god realm master. The old man said softly, "The left reverend is dead." Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." The old man glanced at Yi Xian, "You killed him." Yi Xian smiled, "Yes." Saying so, he looked around, "I'll let you fight the best." He was the best at fighting. The old man was silent for a moment, then said, "You want to find the strongest?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." "Or, all of you can come at me together." The old man glanced at Yi Xian, then said, "I'll take you to the strongest. But the other side is very, very strong, do you dare to go?" Yi Xian laughed heartily, "I'm invincible." "Do as you wish." The old man nodded, "Follow me." With that said, he turned around and walked to the side. Yi Xian followed, and a while later, the old man led Yi Xian to a palace. Yi Xian looked at the palace and couldn't deny that it was luxurious. Yi Xian looked at the old man, "Inside?" The old man nodded, "Yes." With that said, the old man walked into the palace. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then followed behind the old man. Experts like Shaoan were extremely rare. As long as it wasn't this kind of expert, he was invincible. The old man led Yi Xian into the inner palace. The old man stopped in front of the female statue, then turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the female statue, "It's her?" The old man nodded. Yi Xian was about to speak when the female statue suddenly opened her eyes. Yi Xian frowned. He had an uneasy feeling. The old man bowed slightly to the female statue, "Supremacy, we can't do anything to this person." He didn't choose to fight to the death with Yi Xian. Even the left hall master had died at Yi Xian's hands, and this meant that the graveyard of the gods couldn't do anything to Yi Xian anymore. In order to not lose any more people, he directly brought Yi Xian to see the Supremacy. "Didn't you want to kill Yi Xian, Supremacy? Do it yourself." Staying alive was more important than pleasing the Supremacy. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, "Are you the strongest here?" The woman was expressionless, "Yes." Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "I'm just here to take a look, nothing else. Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and ran. However, as soon as he ran to the entrance of the hall, an invisible barrier blocked his path, and then a terrifying aura enveloped him. Yi Xian's face instantly sank. "Damn it. I was too careless." Yi Xian turned around to look at the woman, and she said indifferently, "Why are you running?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "You're that Supremacy." The woman said coldly, "Very smart. Yi Xian smiled. I don't understand. There's no enmity between us, so why do you want to kill me? The woman looked at Yi Xian. What do you think? Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, then said, because of the supreme laws of the universe. The woman said, you're one of her people, so isn't it normal for me to kill you? Or did she not tell you about the enmity between us? Yi Xian frowned slightly. I'm one of her people. As he said, he hurriedly said, is there some kind of misunderstanding? The woman stared at Yi Xian. Misunderstanding? What misunderstanding are you talking about? Yi Xian said seriously, I have nothing to do with her. We've only met twice. There's really no need to involve me in the enmity between you two. Disgusting. The woman suddenly said angrily, I really feel bad for that fan duo. Do you know that she didn't hesitate to block my real body for you, and you actually said that about her? Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? Yi Xian was a little speechless for a moment. That supreme law was helping him? He was a little embarrassed. The woman said again, the person she values is actually so unbearable. How ridiculous. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that the supreme law was actually helping him. However, he was a little puzzled as to why it was helping him. Although they had met before, it was complete nonsense to say that they had any feelings for each other. Moreover, his intuition told him that the supreme law didn't really want to see him. Meanwhile, the woman said, don't worry, I won't kill you just like that. I'll kill you in front of her. As she spoke, she slowly raised her right hand and pressed it down lightly in Yi Xian's direction. Bang! The space around Yi Xian started to shrink. Of course, Yi Xian wouldn't just stand there and wait for death. He immediately drew his sword and slashed. He drew his sword to decide life and death. Bang! The space around him collapsed with a bang. At the same time, the entire hall started to tremble violently. If it wasn't for the barrier around the hall, it would have been obliterated by that strike just now. The woman instantly frowned when she saw Yi Xian destroy her power. Meanwhile, cold sweat appeared on the forehead of the old man from the god's graveyard. Fortunately, he'd brought Yi Xian here. Otherwise, no one in the god's graveyard could suppress Yi Xian. The woman suddenly said, you have some ability. Yi Xian gazed at her. The enmity between you and her is between the two of you. I feel that there's no need to drag me into it. What do you think? The woman laughed coldly. Who do you think you are? Are you even worthy of bargaining with me? I'm your ancestor. Yi Xian suddenly pointed his sword at the woman. Don't you want to kill me? Come. I'm right here. I beg for death. The old man from the god's graveyard was dumbstruck. This fellow actually dares to treat an exalt like this? The woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. I'll fulfill your wish. As she spoke, she suddenly opened her right hand and was about to attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and swiftly drew his sword and slashed at the statue. Draw to decide life and death. 880 overlapped sword draws. The woman flicked her sleeve. Bang! An expanse of sword energy shattered, and then Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively to the entrance of the hall. Meanwhile, over a dozen flying swords suddenly arrived by the woman's side. However, all of them stopped when they were just a dozen inches away from the woman. They couldn't get close at all. The woman gazed at Yi Xian while a wisp of disdain arose on the corners of her mouth, the strength of an ant. As she spoke, she pressed her fingers together and swept them lightly. Bang! The flying swords instantly shattered. The woman suddenly threw a punch at Yi Xian from a distance away. Yi Xian's pupils constricted, and he swiftly raised his sword to block. Invincible sword domain. Bang! In an instant, the sword domain he resided in had warped while formidable energy ceaselessly struck his sword domain. However, he forcefully resisted it in the end. The woman frowned when she witnessed this scene. Sword domain. Yi Xian gazed at the woman, and then he pressed his fingers together. Hiss. The statue's throat suddenly split open. One sword to the head. Almost at the same time, the woman pressed down lightly with her right hand. With this pressure, the crack on her throat returned to normal. Yi Xian's face darkened when he saw this. I can't beat him. Since he couldn't win, he didn't hesitate at all. He turned around and slashed with his sword. Boom! The space suddenly shattered, and the next moment, he directly fled outside. The woman glanced at Yi Xian, who had already fled outside the main hall, and said expressionlessly, trying to escape. You are thinking too much. As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her right hand and clenched it lightly. Time reversal. Boom! Yi Xian, who had already escaped outside the hall, suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he reappeared in the hall, maintaining his previous escape posture. At this moment, time flowed backward. Chapter 1823. Supreme Being. Inside the hall, Yi Xian's face darkened. He knew that he had underestimated these so-called supreme beings. Qing'er could disregard masters of this level, even Shaoan, but there was still a big gap between him and a master of this level. He couldn't stay with Qing'er for too long, otherwise, everyone would look like ants in his eyes. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Didn't you say you wanted to run? Keep running. Yi Xian collected his thoughts, looking at the woman. Why do you have so much nonsense to say? Saying so, he disappeared from the spot. In the distance, a sword light fell from the top of the woman's head. The corner of the woman's mouth curved into a mocking smile, flicking her sleeve. Boom! Yi Xian was sent flying, but he did not fly out of the hall because another invisible barrier appeared at the hall's entrance. When Yi Xian came to a stop, a trickle of blood trickled down the corner of his mouth. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, then turned to look at the woman's statue. Although this woman was not in her true form, an ancient god realm master could not be compared to her. The difference between a supreme being and an ancient god realm master was like heaven and earth. The woman suddenly raised her right hand and pressed down. In the distance, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed. The space above his head suddenly poured down like a great mountain. Yi Xian's right hand raised the sword horizontally to block. Sword domain. Boom! Yi Xian's body trembled violently. Although the sword domain blocked this terrifying force, Yi Xian was clearly suffering. His face was extremely pale, and blood flowed out of his mouth. The woman's heart was also filled with shock. She did not expect Yi Xian to be able to hold out until now. Not to mention Yi Xian, even if it was an ancient god realm master, this avatar of hers could kill him in a second. But Yi Xian had endured until now. There was something wrong with this guy. In order to avoid any changes, the woman's eyes flashed with a trace of cold killing intent. She opened her palm, and countless blood-red talismans suddenly appeared in the hall. The moment these blood-red talismans ignited, the space Yi Xian was in began to burn. Yi Xian's face darkened. What kind of power is this? Yi Xian activated the invincible sword domain once more. The space around him returned to normal the moment the invincible sword domain appeared, but his face swiftly turned pale. His sword domain was withstanding that terrifying power. At this time, Xiao An's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. This is a divine spell. The woman in front of you is not simple. Yi Xian blinked. And what is a divine spell? Xiao An said, it's an extremely ancient technique, be careful. Yi Xian said, don't you want to exchange a few blows with this woman? Xiao An replied with a question, it's best if I don't. Because if I do, then I might draw an even stronger enemy to me. Yi Xian suddenly said, didn't you attack Qing'er just now? Xiao An replied, the workings of the heavens are automatically concealed wherever she is. Can you not? Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao An continued, she isn't in her main body, so you can deal with her. Yi Xian smiled, all right. As he spoke, he gazed at the woman. At this moment, the space around his sword domain was burning. Moreover, his sword domain wouldn't be able to hold on for long. I have to take the initiative to attack. Yi Xian suddenly withdrew his sword domain, and then he took a step forward. As soon as he did, the blood within him started to boil. Bloodline energy. Bang! Yi Xian was completely covered in blood. The woman frowned when she saw Yi Xian activate his bloodline energy, your bloodline. Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot, and a blood-red sword light suddenly slashed down from above the woman's head. Draw the sword to decide life and death. But this time, it wasn't 880, but 960. After activating the power of the bloodline, his strength had received a huge boost. Because his bloodline was also a growth-type bloodline. The stronger he was, the stronger his bloodline leaves would be. The woman's eyes narrowed as the sword descended, and she pressed her fingers together to block. Bang! The statue instantly retreated into the depths of the hall, and the entire hall split apart at this moment. The old man from the god's graveyard was forced into a corner by the powerful sword aura. The old man wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and glanced at Yi Xian in disbelief. This guy is so powerful. He can actually force a sovereign back with a single strike. Although the sovereign before him wasn't in her main body, she was still a sovereign. But this guy actually forced a sovereign back with a single strike. What kind of monster did the god's graveyard provoke? In the distance, the woman who'd been pushed back by Yi Xian had a look of disbelief in her eyes. You. Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot and slashed at the woman again. A ferocious look flashed through the woman's eyes. You're courting death. As she spoke, she clenched her right hand into a fist and smashed it forward. Rumble. As soon as the two forces collided, the entire hall suddenly trembled violently, and then it exploded into nothingness. The barrier's energy had vanished without a trace. The woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. No wonder they couldn't kill you. I have to say that even I underestimated you. Yi Xian suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed at the woman. Slash. As soon as he spoke, over a dozen flying swords slashed towards the woman from all directions. The woman flicked her sleeve. Bang! The flying swords instantly shattered. Meanwhile, Yi Xian appeared above the woman, and then he drew his sword and slashed. Meanwhile, the woman's body suddenly became illusory. Bang! As soon as Yi Xian's sword descended, a strand of formidable force suddenly surged from the sword in his hand to his entire body. Rumble. Yi Xian's figure was instantly blasted flying, and he flew for an entire 30 kilometers. Meanwhile, the woman appeared in front of him again, and then she smashed her fist down towards Yi Xian's head. It was a very calm punch, and it was even very, very slow. However, Yi Xian's expression changed abruptly. That was because this woman's punch had surpassed time, it had surpassed space and time. Yi Xian didn't dare act carelessly, and he hurriedly activated his sword domain. Bang! Yi Xian was pushed back by another 30 kilometers, but he'd forcefully resisted the woman's punch. If it wasn't for the sword domain, then he wouldn't have been able to resist a single attack from her. The gap between them was quite huge. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth, and then he gazed at the woman. The woman opened her palm, and then a ball of flames suddenly arose within it. In the next moment, an ocean of flames suddenly appeared above Yi Xian. The woman's cherry lips parted slightly. Incinerate. As soon as she finished speaking, the space around Yi Xian's sword domain instantly started burning. Yi Xian suddenly issued a command in his heart, and then countless rays of sword light crisscrossed around him. However, his sword wasn't able to slash apart the flames. The woman stared at Yi Xian and said, "Let me see how long your sword domain can persist for." Yi Xian slowly sheathed his sword in his right hand, and then he slowly closed his eyes. Bang! A strand of formidable sword energy suddenly swept out from within him. The woman stared at Yi Xian while she slowly clenched her left fist. Yi Xian had given her too many surprises. There were truly too many pleasant surprises and surprises. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and then he swiftly drew his sword and slashed. Hiss! This slash instantly tore apart the flames in front of him. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly appeared in front of him, and then she smashed her fist towards him. The heavens and the earth trembled with this single punch. This punch smashed directly onto Yi Xian's descending sword. Rumble. Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively. At the instant that Yi Xian retreated, the woman suddenly pressed forward and smashed her fist towards Yi Xian again. Yi Xian's pupils constricted, and he raised his sword to block it. Rumble. Yi Xian instantly retreated over 30 kilometers away along with his sword. After he stopped moving, Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood essence. However, the woman didn't give Yi Xian a chance. She appeared in front of Yi Xian again and was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Bang! A blood-red ray of sword light slashed straight down towards the woman's head. Moreover, the woman's figure suddenly became illusory. Rumble. The sword light was instantly shattered as soon as it descended, and then Yi Xian retreated explosively once more. Meanwhile, Xiao An's voice suddenly resounded in Yi Xian's mind. That's a divine body. Your sword can't harm her. A divine body. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth and said, but this isn't her true body. Xiao An said, it isn't her true body, but this clone of hers is a body as well. Ordinary swords can't harm it. So you have to use that divine sword of yours. The Green Mystic. Yi Xian's face fell. The Green Mystic sword was still breaking through. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly said, come. Let me see how monstrous you are. As she spoke, she suddenly pressed her fingers together and pointed them at Yi Xian from afar. Rumble. The space where Yi Xian resided suddenly exploded apart, and then countless strands of mysterious energy shot towards Yi Xian. The energy of space. Yi Xian was shocked. This time, he didn't utilize his sword domain, and he went head-on against it instead. He drew his sword and slashed again. However, he didn't execute sword draw to decide life and death this time. He drew his sword madly. He slashed it wildly. Bang! 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 Numerous rays of light shot out like a storm from the space where Yi Xian resided. In an instant, the energy of space in the surroundings was completely blasted into pieces. Not far away, the woman frowned. Have you gone mad? Yi Xian's eyes gradually turned blood red, and he laughed fiercely. Come. Continue. As he spoke, his figure vanished on the spot. An expanse of blood-red light flashed like a thunderclap. The woman took a step forward, and with that step, the blood-colored sword light was forced to a stop by her. It was Yi Xian. Rumble. Yi Xian wasn't even able to react before his figure was blasted flying again. However, over a dozen blood-red flying swords shot towards the woman at the exact same instant that he was blasted flying. The woman waved her hand lightly. Bang! The flying swords instantly vanished without a trace. The woman gazed at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian had stood up again. He'd been struck down over and over again, but he'd stood up again and again. The killing intent in the woman's eyes grew denser as she gazed at Yi Xian, who'd stood up again. The woman slowly clenched her right fist, and then an invisible force suddenly swept through the heavens and the earth. At the same time, Yi Xian's pupils constricted. At this moment, he sensed the aura of death. Death! Yi Xian suddenly roared with laughter. Woman, didn't you want to kill me? I seek death. Come, kill me. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly swung his sword. He sought death with this strike. He didn't seek victory with this strike, he sought death. Author's note: I seek votes on the last day. I've been working hard to accumulate more manuscripts, and I'll erupt once I accumulate more. Chapter 1824. seeking death with a single strike. At the instant that Yi Xian attacked, the entire world suddenly collapsed. Seeking death. At this moment, Yi Xian's aura had reached a peak. The mysterious energy in the world was directly crushed by his aura. At the same time, a ray of light slashed towards the woman. The woman opened her right hand, and then she lightly pushed it forward. Bang! She'd actually forcefully blocked Yi Xian's attack. However, the gods' graveyard that they resided in had started to die bit by bit. Their strength was too formidable, and the world was utterly unable to endure it. A moment of silence ensued. Bang! The woman was forcefully pushed 300 m back by Yi Xian's attack, and she just stopped when Yi Xian suddenly pressed his fingers together. Head snatch. It was the head snatch technique that was enhanced by the power of his bloodline. The woman's throat suddenly split open. She frowned slightly, and then she pressed down lightly with her right hand. Her throat returned to normal. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly charged in front of her, drew his sword, and slashed. Bang! In an instant, the woman was pushed over 300 m back. She just stopped when over a dozen blood-red flying swords slashed towards her. The woman raised her arm to block it. Bang! The sword light shattered, and the woman was pushed back another 300 m. When she finally stopped, her entire body was covered in cracks. Yi Xian was just about to attack again when the woman suddenly flicked her sleeve. Yi Xian's pupils constricted, and he raised his sword to block it. The invincible sword domain. Bang! The space where Yi Xian resided was suddenly obliterated, but Yi Xian was still there, and his invincible sword domain had forcefully blocked the woman's formidable strength. Actually, if he didn't have the invincible sword domain, then he wouldn't even have the chance to attack. Because he wouldn't be able to withstand a single attack from the woman without the invincible sword domain. The woman glanced at her cracked body. After a moment of silence, she gazed at Yi Xian. At this moment, there was a rare trace of seriousness in her eyes. Yi Xian's current strength was still like an ant to her. However, Yi Xian's sword skills were not simple at all. Especially this sword domain. He was actually able to block her power. This was not normal. There was also the power of Yi Xian's bloodline, which was also very abnormal. In any case, Yi Xian was a little abnormal. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly took a deep breath, and then numerous strands of sword energy surged incessantly from within him. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Continue. Yi Xian looked at the woman. Then let's continue. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared on the spot. The woman flicked her sleeve. Rumble. The space in front of the woman exploded, and a powerful force instantly engulfed Yi Xian's sword light. At this moment, countless flying swords suddenly slashed at the woman. A flying sword condensed from the sword of spacetime. These flying swords were extremely fast, but no matter how fast they were, they could not get close to the woman. The only real threats to the woman were draw the sword to decide life and death and decapitation. Although the woman was powerful, Yi Xian's sword domain could block her power. However, if this continued, it would be more and more disadvantageous for Yi Xian. On the other side, the elder in the graveyard of gods stared at Yi Xian, who was fighting with the supreme woman in the distance. At this moment, he could be said to be extremely shocked. This Yi Xian was actually so powerful. Were the left hall master and the others crazy? They actually went against this freak. As for the woman fighting with Yi Xian, she became more and more shocked because she discovered that the bigger Yi Xian was, the stronger he was. Soon, she understood. Yi Xian was using her to practice his moves. Although Yi Xian had cultivated in Xiao Ta's body to some extent, he had never fought in real combat. And ordinary experts were not his match at all. However, he could not defeat those who were too strong, such as Shaoan. The woman before him happened to be a suitable candidate. After the woman found out about Yi Xian's intentions, she naturally would not let Yi Xian have his way. She started to attack wildly, but Yi Xian's sword domain forcefully blocked all of her attacks. Not only that, but Yi Xian could also counterattack. As they fought, both sides entered a stalemate, and neither could do anything to the other. Yi Xian was at a slight disadvantage, but the woman could not kill him. Neither of them could do anything to the other, and the graveyard of gods was in trouble. Because both of them were destroying without restraint, the graveyard of gods did not dare to stop them. It could only take some graves with it and run away. This was the first time in history that the graveyard of gods had moved graves. At this moment, Yi Xian was suddenly blasted away. This time, the woman did not attack again. The woman looked at Yi Xian, and her statue body was covered in cracks. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and grinned. Continue. As he spoke, he was about to attack again. However, the woman's body suddenly became illusory. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Why did you stop? The woman did not speak. She just stared at Yi Xian, and then she gradually vanished. It didn't take long for her to vanish completely. Yi Xian frowned. Up in the clouds, Tong Yi suddenly opened her eyes, and then her expression became ferocious, "Aunt." As she spoke, she was about to leave and head to the lower dimensions. Meanwhile, Fan Duo appeared in front of her. Tong Yi stared fixedly at her. "You're trying to stop me." Fan Duo smiled. "Your clone is gone." Tong Yi stared at her. "You seem very pleased with yourself." Fan Duo shook her head. "Tong Yi, we've been enemies for hundreds of thousands of years. Even though I really want you to die, you can't touch the man down there." Tong Yi ridiculed. "Do you think I can't touch him just because you say so?" Fan Duo glanced at Tong Yi. "He's not one of my people. You can target me if you want to." Tong Yi stared fixedly at Fan Duo. "It doesn't matter if he's one of your people or not, because he succeeded in infuriating me. He must die." Fan Duo sighed softly. "Cultivation isn't easy. Why seek death?" "What a joke." Tong Yi sneered. "Who does he think he is? Killing him is courting death?" Fan Duo spoke indifferently. "Up to you." With that, she turned around and left. Tong Yi fell silent. She didn't go look for Yi Xian because she'd noticed that something was off. After pondering for a moment, she turned around and left. In the god's graveyard, Yi Xian lay on the ground. He'd returned to normal. He'd gained a lot from the battle with the Supreme Woman. Battle. One had to admit that it was very easy for a person to grow through battle. In the beginning, he'd been practically suppressed by the woman, but later on, he was able to deal with her with ease. He couldn't just bury himself in cultivation. He had to constantly fight opponents. Yi Xian turned around and glanced at the surroundings. At this moment, all the experts of the god's graveyard had fled. Even the clone of a supreme couldn't kill Yi Xian, so the experts of the god's graveyard naturally wouldn't stay and wait for death. Yi Xian didn't go look for them because they were meaningless to him. Right at this moment, Shaoan suddenly appeared by Yi Xian's side. She glanced at the surroundings and said, "If that woman had been her true body, then you wouldn't have been able to last a single move." Yi Xian looked at Shaoan. "Is there a huge gap between us?" Shaoan nodded. "Very." Yi Xian fell silent. Shaoan looked at Yi Xian. "If you want to go against her, then you must overcome a threshold." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What is it?" Shaoan said, "The laws." Yi Xian's brows furrowed slightly. "The laws?" Shaoan nodded. "Every universe has its laws, and this universe has them too. The reason she was able to suppress you before was because she is above the laws. The reason you were able to go against her was because of those terrifying sword skills of yours. If it were any other sword skill, you would have been long dead." Yi Xian nodded. "Indeed. As you said, the reason I was able to go against her was because of these sword skills that I created myself." Xiao Ta was speechless. Shaoan turned to look at Yi Xian. She just stared at Yi Xian as if she was meeting Yi Xian for the first time. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. What's wrong? Shaoan said, the sword skills that you created yourself? Yi Xian asked, what's wrong? Shaoan said, are you serious? Yi Xian blinked. You don't believe me? Shaoan hesitated for a moment before saying, you. I'll keep quiet. Yi Xian was speechless. Shaoan suddenly said, do you want to cultivate a divine body? Yi Xian looked at Shaoan, I'm only in the space-time realm now. Shaoan shook her head. It's fine. The cultivation system over there is different from here. The current you can already cultivate a divine body. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I can directly skip several realms and cultivate a divine body. Shaoan said, I've already said that the cultivation system here is different from the cultivation system over there. You don't have to cultivate the next realms of this universe. Yi Xian blinked his eyes. Really? Shaoan nodded. Sure. Yi Xian smiled. All right. Shaoan nodded slightly. It's not difficult to cultivate a divine body. You need to first understand the difference between a mortal body and a divine body. It's a metamorphosis and a qualitative change from a mortal to a divine body. This process is like a cocoon turning into a butterfly. As she spoke, she suddenly pointed at the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. Boom! Countless information surged into the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. After a moment, Shaoan retracted her finger and said, this is the cultivation method, as well as some of my insights and experiences. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Thank you. At this moment, his heart was undoubtedly shaken. Divine body. To Qing, this was still like an ant. However, it was different for Yi Xian. He also wanted to reach the level of Qing, and ignore all realms. However, he also understood that if he did not experience all the realms, how could he ignore all the realms? Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and returned to Xiao Ta. In the following time, he began to cultivate his divine body. Shaoan did not return to Xiao Ta. She slowly closed her eyes. As if she had sensed something, her pupils suddenly shrank. She suddenly raised her head, and somewhere far away, a man suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment, the man's eyes were filled with fear. Holy Venerable. You're really still alive. As he spoke, he directly left the hall and went straight to a temple. In God's graveyard. Shaoan withdrew her gaze. Shaoan opened her palm and Fire De appeared in her hand. Shaoan looked at Fire De and said, you informed them. Fire De said, yes. Shaoan slowly closed her eyes. You want to drag Xiao Xuanzi down with you? Fire De said in a low voice, yes. Holy Venerable, we can only rely on the strength of the person behind him to kill the ancient devil and that woman. Shaoan suddenly clenched her right hand. Boom! Fire De's entire body became illusory. Shaoan looked at Fire De coldly. Are you telling me what to do? Chapter 1825. Fire De grinned, Holy Venerable, you can kill me, but even if you give me another chance, I will still do the same. Shaoan stared at Fire De, this matter has nothing to do with him, do you understand? Fire De nodded, I know it has nothing to do with him, but we must drag him down with us. We must make the ancient devil and that woman target him. Only then can the person behind him be with us. Shaoan slowly closed her eyes. Fire De said, Holy Venerable, in that battle, almost all of our people died. Without external help, it will be difficult for us to take revenge. And this Yi Xian, he is our best chance. Shaoan glanced at Fire De, you can leave. Fire De was stunned. Shaoan softly said, you swore to follow me, I can't bear to kill you, but I also don't want to keep you by my side. You can leave. Fire De trembled, Holy Venerable, you can scold me, you can kill me, but you can't drive me away. Shaoan shook her head, I told you, if he treats me with sincerity, I will treat him with sincerity. He let us recuperate in Xiao Ta's body, but we schemed against him. Such behavior is shameful. Saying that, she glanced at Fire De. Fire De, I know you are doing this for my own good. You also want revenge, but even if it is revenge, you should not resort to unscrupulous means. Whether it is a human or a god, there should be a bottom line. You have followed me for many years, I can't bear to kill you, but I also can't keep you. You can leave. Fire De begged, Holy Venerable, I have no home, if you drive me away, where can I go? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared on the scene. He heard the conversation between Shaoan and Fire De. Shaoan looked at Yi Xian, we should part ways. Yi Xian looked at Shaoan, are you afraid of dragging me down? Shaoan said, if I leave now, I won't drag you down. Yi Xian said, then how will you recover? Shaoan was silent. The best place is Yi Xian's Xiao Ta. Because 10 years inside was equivalent to 1 day outside. As long as she stayed here for a few more days, her injuries would be completely healed. Not only that, but she would also have extra time to cultivate and advance to the next level. After all, she had been asleep for more than 100,000 years. During this time, her enemy had not been sleeping, but cultivating. But now, if she didn't leave, Yi Xian would be implicated. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Fire Lord and said, you want to drag me into this mess so that Qing can intervene in your affairs. Fire De nodded. Yes. Yi Xian looked at Fire De. Do you know Qing's temper? Fire De glanced at Yi Xian. I don't know. Yi Xian smiled and said, don't play these tricks in front of her. Otherwise, you will regret it. Plot against Qing'er. In fact, he knew that Qing'er's IQ was also very, very scary. But now, she didn't want to play with it anymore. For Qing'er, playing with IQ was for those without strength. Yi Xian suddenly said, Fire De, for Xiao An's sake, I won't kill you. As she said, you can go. Fire De was silent for a moment, then he respectfully bowed to Shaoan and turned to leave. Yi Xian looked at the distant Fire De, thinking about something. Shaoan suddenly said, he won't give up. Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian and said, I have to go. Yi Xian was silent for a moment and said, how long will it take for your people to get here? Shaoan said, about half a month. Yi Xian smiled and said, then you can stay for 14 days. After 14 days, you can leave, okay? Shaoan looked at Yi Xian and said, you actually want to kill Fire De, right? Yi Xian nodded, I want to kill him because of this. This guy is not a good person. If he leaves, he will become a disaster. Shaoan asked, then why don't you kill him? Yi Xian smiled and said, because of you, of course. Shaoan looked at Yi Xian and said, because of me? Yi Xian smiled and said, if not because of you, who else can it be? Shaoan, I don't know how strong you were before, but when I met you, I simply treated you as a younger sister, and it is the same now. I don't want to affect the good karma between us because of Fire De. Shaoan was silent for a long time and said, I also want to kill him. But I can't do it. What he did. I am very sorry. I never thought of using you. Yi Xian nodded and said, I know. Shaoan looked at Yi Xian and said, when I leave, I will help you kill that woman. Yi Xian shook his head and said, I let Fire De go because of you, not because I want to exchange with you. Shaoan said, I know. I killed that woman because I wanted to help you, not because of you setting Fire De. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled and said, let's not talk about this anymore. I will cultivate, and you will heal. Shaoan nodded and said, I will go for a walk. Yi Xian said, okay. With that, he directly returned to Xiao Ta. Shaoan turned around. With that, she directly vanished. When she reappeared, she was already in a region of stars. And Fire De was not far in front of her. Seeing Shaoan, Fire De was stunned. Shaoan looked at Fire De and without any nonsense, she waved her right hand and a white light directly enveloped Fire De. Fire De looked at Shaoan and said, Holy Venerable wants to kill me? Shaoan shook her head and said, I won't kill you. But I want to imprison you. Imprison you for 10 years. After 10 years, you will no longer be a threat to him. With that, she waved her right hand and the white light was directly sent into an unknown space and time. Imprison Fire De for 10 years. Shaoan turned and left. Inside Xiao Ta, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and began to cultivate his divine body. In fact, it was very difficult. It was definitely not easy to go from a mortal body to a divine body, but fortunately, with the experience left by Shaoan, he could get twice the result with half the effort. Moreover, Shaoan could guide him at any time. Somewhere in the clouds, Tong Yi stood quietly. Behind her was an old man in a black robe. Tong Yi said, I want to know everything about Yi Xian. Remember, everything. The old man in black bowed slightly and said, Understood. With that, he quietly disappeared. Tong Yi's eyes slowly closed. About an hour later, the old man in black appeared again and bowed slightly. Supreme, this person is not simple. Tong Yi said, Speak. The old man in black said, Two are not simple. First, the person behind this person is not simple. There are two people behind this person, a man and a woman, both swordsmen. Both of them have appeared in the lower realm. According to the people in the lower realm, these two people have never used a second sword to kill someone. Tong Yi said softly, Yi Xian's sword skill should be from these two people. The old man in black nodded, Yes. Tong Yi said again, What about the second one? The old man in black said in a deep voice, Yi Xian has an extremely powerful sword in his hand. This sword is called Green Mystic, and it is extremely extraordinary. Not only does it contain the power of the supreme laws of the universe, but it also contains the Tao of space-time. Moreover, it is the power of space-time that far surpasses our current universe. Tong Yi frowned slightly, Far surpasses? The old man in black said, Yes. As for the rest of the sword, I don't know because Yi Xian himself rarely uses this sword. With that, he paused and said, Yi Xian went to the Nightmare Star territory before, and the Nightmare family in the Nightmare Star territory has been destroyed by someone. The person who was killed was that woman in plain dress. Clan annihilated. Tong Yi asked softly, Was it easy? The old man in black answered, One sword. Tong Yi turned around, Only one sword? The old man in black nodded, Only one sword. Another silence. The old man in black continued, This woman is extraordinary. She was the one who forged Yi Xian's sword. The fact that she was able to forge such a divine sword means that her strength. At this point, she didn't say anything else. Tong Yi asked, You're trying to say that her strength has reached our level? The old man in black nodded, Yes. Another silence. The old man in black continued, Venerable One, during my investigation of Yi Xian, I discovered another thing. Tong Yi said, Speak. The old man in black said solemnly, This person's growth speed is terrifying. I have never seen anyone grow faster than him. Tong Yi frowned slightly, What do you mean? The old man said, Not long ago, this person couldn't even defeat an ancient God Realm Master's clone, but not long after, he could already kill ancient God Realm Masters. When he returned from the Nightmare Starfield, his strength could easily kill ancient God Realm Masters in a second. Not only that, he could even fight with a Venerable One's clone. His face turned solemn as he said this. In less than a month, his cultivation didn't change much, but his battle prowess became more and more terrifying. After a moment of silence, Tong Yi asked, Is he one of Fondwa's people? The old man in black said, I don't know, but as far as I know, one of his women is learning the Tao of Law from Venerable Fanduo. There must be some relationship between them. But it might not be the kind we think. She looked at Tong Yi, Venerable One, I have a thought. You're trying to say that if he's not one of Fondwa's people, then the reason his sword has Fanduo's origin power is because someone forcefully took Fanduo's origin power, and Fanduo didn't dare resist. Not only that, but Fanduo also accepted someone from the lower realm as her disciple because of someone else? The old man in black nodded, yes. Hearing this, Tong Yi slowly closed his eyes. His expression gradually turned solemn. A person that even Fanduo had to give face to, the woman in plain dress. Was she really that terrifying? A moment later, Tong Yi suddenly said, there's one more thing. When Yi Xian faced Venerable Fanduo, he was neither servile nor overbearing. Tong Yi said softly, he was neither servile nor overbearing when facing me, which means he has seen people as strong as us, or even stronger than us. The old man in black nodded. Tong Yi asked, how much do you know about the woman in plain dress? The old man in black shook his head, not much. But now, there's no news of her. Even if I use the Supreme Heaven's Eye, I can't find her. He looked at Tong Yi, Venerable One, if you really want to kill this person, you might have to deal with the man in green and the woman in plain dress behind him first. After a long silence, Tong Yi said, I won't kill him. The old man in black looked at Tong Yi and said, although killing Yi Xian can vent my anger, there's no benefit. Not only is there no benefit, but we might also provoke some unknown powerful enemies. As for taking the initiative to find those two, am I crazy? It's fine if I can beat them, but if I can't, wouldn't I just be sending myself to die? I'm not stupid, why would I do such a stupid thing? After saying this, she turned and left. The old man in black. P.S. Happy New Year, everyone. Today is my 18th birthday, can I ask for a monthly ticket? Chapter 1826. Hearing that, the black-robed old man shook his head and smiled. Then what do you plan to do, Supremacy? After a moment of silence, Tong Yi said, continue the investigation. The more detailed, the better. The black-robed old man nodded. All right. With that, he was about to leave. At this moment, Tong Yi suddenly said, don't provoke him. The black-robed old man nodded. Understood. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished into thin air. Tong Yi slowly closed her eyes. Invincible? She had never thought that she was invincible. There was always someone better than her. She was only the supremacy of this universe, and even in this universe, she was not the strongest. Above the supremacy, there was still the God Emperor. And she herself knew that there were still two God Emperors alive right now. Of course, she did not like Yi Xian. However, she would not make an enemy out of some unknown powerful enemy just because she was unhappy. That would be stupid. A moment later, Tong Yi turned around and left. Inside Xiao Ta's room. Under Xiao An's guidance, Yi Xian's cultivation could be said to have advanced by leaps and bounds. Now, he was only half a step away from attaining the divine physique. On a certain mountain peak, Yi Xian and Xiao An sat opposite each other. Yi Xian asked, Xiao An, if I cultivate to the divine physique, will I be invincible? Xiao An nodded. Sort of. Of course, nothing is absolute. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Xiao An turned to look at the horizon and said softly, I have to go. Half a month was almost up. Yi Xian said, how are your injuries recovering? Xiao An said, I have almost recovered. I can deal with my opponents now. Yi Xian nodded. Then I won't keep you. Xiao An nodded slightly. You are now only half a step away from attaining the divine physique realm. This half a step seems very close, but it is actually very far. Because many people are unable to take this step in their entire lives. Yi Xian asked, do you have any suggestions? Xiao An said, just let nature take its course. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Xiao An added, take care. With that, she got up and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, I'll send you off. Xiao An glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. All right. The two of them disappeared into the Xiao Ta. In the starry sky, Yi Xian accompanied Shaoan into the distance. Shaoan said, "If you encounter the woman's original body right now, you still need to be careful." Yi Xian nodded. "I will. What about you? Are you going back to take revenge?" Shaoan nodded. Yi Xian was just about to speak when Shaoan suddenly raised his head. In the next moment, the end of the starry sky split open, and then 9 enormous dragons flew out while dragging a palace behind them. The 9 dragons were all colossal creatures, each of them at least 10,000 feet long. As soon as the 9 dragons appeared, the entire starry sky began to boil like water. Shaoan said softly, "We're too late." Yi Xian was speechless. Right at this moment, the 9 dragons flew above Shaoan, and the palace's door suddenly opened. After that, a woman in a red dress walked out slowly. The woman wore a red dress and a feathered crown on her head. She had picturesque features, and a sheathed sword hung from her waist. The sword was a meter long and 2 fingers wide. The scabbard was painted with strange beasts, and there was a small red word at the top of the hilt, Imperial. There were 2 old men behind the woman. Both of them lowered their heads slightly, and they were completely lifeless. The woman walked down the stone steps. In the end, she arrived at the head of an enormous dragon, and then she looked down at Shaoan and said with a smile, "And Wujuan, you're really still alive." Shaoan looked at the woman. "Are you disappointed?" The woman smiled. "A little." Shaoan turned to look at Yi Xian. "You go first." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, "Can you handle it?" Shaoan nodded. "You go first." Yi Xian was about to speak. Meanwhile, the woman's gaze suddenly descended onto Yi Xian, and she smiled. "This is?" Shaoan glanced at the woman. "Jingji, didn't you come here to look for me?" The woman called Jingji smiled. "We came here to look for you. However, I heard from Huada that he knows a young man, and this young man possesses an extremely heaven-defying divine artifact. Supposedly, the space within this divine artifact is different from the space in the outside world. 10 years in there is equivalent to a day in the outside world." As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian, and her smile grew even brighter. "Is that true?" "Huada." Yi Xian frowned. "Damn it. Huada really wants to drag me down with him." Shaoan turned to look at Yi Xian. "I'm sorry." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "I'll kill him the next time I see him." Shaoan nodded. "All right." Meanwhile, Jingji suddenly smiled and said, "Looks like this young brother really does possess such a divine artifact." As she spoke, she spread open her palm, and her smile grew even brighter. "Young brother, this thing is rather useful to me. Can you give it to me? So long as you give it to me, I can guarantee that you'll be able to leave this place alive." Yi Xian glanced at Jingji and smiled. "Miss, I have no intention of interfering in the matters of the ancient god world. As for that divine artifact, it was left to me by my younger sister, so I really can't give it away. Of course, if it's someone on our side, then I can give it to her." Jingji blinked. "Someone on our side? What do you mean?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Even though I can't give it to an outsider, if she's my woman, then she isn't an outsider." How presumptuous. An old man behind Jingji suddenly shouted angrily. In the next moment, a terrifying aura directly locked onto Yi Xian, and in an instant, the space where Yi Xian was directly annihilated. Meanwhile, Shaoan waved her right hand, and the mysterious energy that enveloped Yi Xian directly vanished. The old man glanced at Shaoan, and a trace of fear flashed through his eyes. He didn't dare to attack again. The corners of Jingji's mouth suddenly curled up slightly, and he smiled. "Huada said that you're a smart person. Moreover, your skin is especially thick. He told me to be absolutely careful when facing you. I can't tell for now whether you're smart or not, but your skin is really thick." Yi Xian smiled. "What else did Huada say?" Jingji lightly stomped his right foot on the dragon's head, and the nine-headed dragon slowly descended. In the end, it stopped 300 m above Yi Xian and Xiao An's heads. Jingji looked at Yi Xian. He told me that besides Xiao Ta, you also have a very, very valuable sword. Not only that, he also said that you have a younger sister who is especially good at forging divine objects. I think her name is Qing, right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Jingji smiled. Where is she? Yi Xian turned to look at Shaoan. Huada is not a good Huada. Shaoan, Jingji suddenly said, little brother, I'll give you one last chance. If you're willing to hand over Xiao Ta and the sword that Huada mentioned, I can let you leave alive. Of course, if you're willing to take them out for me to see, and they aren't divine weapons like Huada said, I'm also willing to let you go. Yi Xian was silent. If he took them out, he definitely wouldn't be able to leave. Even Shaoan valued Xiao Ta so much. This meant that Xiao Ta's terrifying ability was very rare even in the ancient god world. At this moment, Shaoan suddenly said, go. I'll stop them. Yi Xian shook his head. It's no use. If they kill you, they'll still come looking for me. I never thought that I, Yi Xian, who has been wise my whole life, would be tricked by a Huada. Ashamed. Ashamed. Shaoan softly said, I'm really sorry. Yi Xian laughed. Shaoan, you don't need to apologize to me. Shaoan looked up at Jingji. Let's not involve him in our grievances. Is that okay? Jingji looked at Shaoan and smiled. Are you begging me? Shaoan was silent. Yi Xian suddenly took Xiao An's hand and smiled. Since it's come to this, there's no point in saying more. Just fight her. Shaoan thought for a moment and then said, fighting is not a problem, but why are you holding my hand? Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. I'm a little flustered. I feel more at ease holding your hand. Shaoan glanced at Yi Xian. How many women have you deceived with this trick? Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Jingji suddenly smiled and said, Gentlemen, I didn't come all the way here to watch the two of you flirt. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. Since you're unwilling to hand it over obediently, then I can only kill you and take it myself. Left General, kill him. As soon as she finished speaking, an old man behind her suddenly vanished on the spot. At the instant that the old man vanished, Shaoan was about to attack. However, Jingji suddenly gazed at Shaoan, and a powerful strand of sword energy enveloped Shaoan. At the same time, a ray of light descended from the sky and slashed towards Shaoan. A trace of disdain flashed through Shaoan's eyes. She stomped her right foot lightly against the ground and shot into the sky. She was going head-on. On the other side, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically when the old man vanished, and he swiftly drew his sword and slashed. Draw to decide life and death. As soon as he swung his sword, an expanse of light suddenly erupted in front of him. Rumble. Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively, and he'd moved 5,000 kilometers back. As soon as he stopped moving, a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. Yi Xian wiped the blood off the corner of his mouth, and then he couldn't help but curse in his heart as he gazed at the old man who'd retreated 3 kilometers as well. Damn it. How long has it been? My enemies are acting strangely again. How can they play like this? The left general glanced at his right hand, and there was a deep gash on it. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes as he gazed at Yi Xian. A mortal like you actually injured me. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth again, and then he vanished on the spot. Meanwhile, a ray of light suddenly appeared above the left general, and it slashed down like a thunderclap. The left general opened his palm, and a spear appeared there before he swung it with his right hand. Boom! A ray of spear light shot out and slashed the ray of sword light into pieces. But right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. After the flying sword, it was time to draw the sword to decide life and death. Right now, Even if he didn't use his bloodline power, he could still stack 900 sword draws to determine life and death. The moment the sword appeared, the world shook. The left general's pupils constricted when he sensed the terrifying strength of Yi Xian's attack, and he raised his spear to block it. Rumble. Along with a deafening explosion, the left general was instantly pushed back thousands of feet. Yi Xian blinked, before looking at the sword ruins in his hand. He sighed from the bottom of his heart, this sword skill that I've created isn't just any ordinary awesome. I'm such a genius. Xiao Ta. Chapter 1827. At this moment, the left commander who stood before Yi Xian was filled with disbelief. He was an expert at the divine physique realm. However, he'd been injured by an ordinary person. How could this be possible? The left commander gazed at Yi Xian. It's that sword technique of yours. At this moment, he discerned how extraordinary Yi Xian's sword technique was. Yi Xian said with a smile, again. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. Hiss. A strand of sword light flashed through the battlefield. A wisp of ferocity flashed through the left commander's eyes. He didn't dodge and allowed Yi Xian's sword to stab the center of his forehead. Bang! In an instant, the left commander's body turned illusory, but it didn't take long for him to return to normal. After that, both of them retreated explosively. As they retreated, Yi Xian pressed his fingers together and made a slight movement. He'd taken the head with a single strike. The left commander's pupils constricted while his throat had been split open. However, his body turned illusory again in the next moment, and the injury on his throat had vanished when he returned to normal. Yi Xian frowned when he witnessed this scene. He knew that once one attained the divine physique realm, one would possess a unique defensive ability. However, he was also aware that such a defensive ability couldn't be utilized frequently because it consumed a huge amount of energy. At this moment, fear had appeared in the left commander's eyes. After all, these sword techniques that Yi Xian had executed were already capable of posing a material threat to him. There's something strange about this young man. Meanwhile, Jingji and Shaoan suddenly stopped in the distance. Jingji placed her left hand on the hilt of her sword as she gazed at Shaoan and smiled. You're much weaker than before. Shaoan spoke softly, you're much stronger than before. Jingji smiled, you'll surpass me if you work hard. However, I won't give you the time to do so. Shaoan gazed at Jingji, then let's continue. Jingji was just about to attack when she seemed to have noticed something, and she suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. You're still alive? Yi Xian smiled, are you very disappointed? Jingji gazed at the left commander. The left commander spoke solemnly, hallowed Lord, he isn't simple at all. Not simple? Jingji looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, looks like you're not ordinary. Yi Xian glanced at the sword in Jingji's hand and asked, are you a swordsman? Jingji nodded. Yes. Swordsman. Yi Xian looked at Jingji and said, let's make a bet. Do you dare? What bet? Jingji asked with a smile. Yi Xian said, I'll take a strike from you. If I do, give me another month. Jingji shook his head and smiled. Why should I bet with you? I'm now. Yi Xian suddenly raised his head. The supreme law of the universe. Help. Everyone, in the starry sky, there was no movement at all. Yi Xian felt a little awkward. At this time, Jingji suddenly frowned. She turned her head and saw a woman slowly walking over from a distance. It was Fanduo. Fanduo looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Seeing Fanduo, Yi Xian hurriedly said, Master, you're here. Master. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Jingji slightly frowned and looked at Fanduo. You're on the same side. Fanduo was about to speak when Yi Xian hurriedly said, Of course we're on the same side. Fanduo glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Jingji smiled. I don't think you're on the same side. Yi Xian hurriedly walked to Fan Duo and bowed slightly. Beautiful master, please help me. Fan Duo smiled. For your sake or for her sake? Yi Xian said, for Dao Yi's sake. After a moment of silence, Fan Duo looked at Jing Ji and said, we're on the same side. In the end, she still chose to form a good relationship with Yi Xian. Because she was invincible. Jing Ji smiled. So be it. It doesn't matter. Yi Xian looked at Jing Ji. In terms of numbers, we're even. If we fight head-on, you don't have a 100% chance of winning, right? Jing Ji nodded. Yes. Yi Xian said, it took you half a month to get here from ancient god world. In other words, if you continue to call for reinforcements, it will take another half a month, right? Jing Ji looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, so, you want to buy Lord and Wuju in half a month's time? No, if that small tower of yours is really a divine weapon like Fire De said, 10 years inside is 1 day outside, and half a month's time, TSK. Little brother, you really calculated well. Yi Xian smiled. You're really smart, just like me. Jing Ji laughed. You're really interesting, little fellow. Come, didn't you want to take my sword? Are you ready? At the side, Fan Duo suddenly said, you don't have to take her sword. Jing Ji smiled. If you don't, then we'll fight now until my people arrive. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Shaoan, how's her character? Shaoan said indifferently, if her character is good, she wouldn't have betrayed us in the first place. Yi Xian looked at Jing Ji. Your character isn't very good. Jing Ji smiled. Character is like face, it's the most useless thing in this world. What's the use of it? Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta suddenly said, little lord, you've met your match. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. This kind of shameless person was a bit difficult to deal with. Jing Ji suddenly put his left hand on the hilt of his sword and smiled. Since you don't want to take my sword, then let's fight until my people arrive in half a month. With that, she was about to attack. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, I'll take your sword. Shaoan suddenly appeared by Yi Xian's side and shook her head. You're not a match for her. Yi Xian smiled, it's just a single strike. It's fine. Shaoan frowned slightly and was about to speak when Yi Xian smiled and said, don't worry. Jing Ji suddenly smiled and said, bring it on. As she spoke, she suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and she was about to draw her sword with her left hand. However, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly in the next moment, and then she slammed her right fist towards Yi Xian's head. This sudden turn of events caused Yi Xian's expression to change drastically. Damn it. This woman isn't using her sword but her fists. She doesn't play by the rules. At this critical moment, Yi Xian utilized his sword domain. Invincible sword domain. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated 30 kilometers away, and the reason he stopped was because Shaoan had appeared behind him. Yi Xian clenched his fists tightly, and his entire body was trembling. His sword domain had been destroyed. His body had almost been destroyed. No, if it wasn't for Shaoan, then his body would have been destroyed. It was Shaoan who forcefully protected his body. Jing Ji suddenly smiled and said, your sword domain was very interesting. Yi Xian took a deep breath, and then he looked at Jing Ji and grinned, didn't you say you would use your sword? Jing Ji smiled, what realm are you at? What realm am I at? It's like the difference between the heavens and the earth. However, you dared to ask me to draw my sword. There's definitely something fishy about this. Even though I don't know what it is, I know that you definitely have a way to resist my sword. So, I didn't draw my sword. Yi Xian smiled, I was careless. Jing Ji roared with laughter, however, I'm quite curious. I'm curious about why you think you can resist my sword. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, because I'm a swordsman. I just want to experience a powerful sword cultivator. I don't have any other intentions. Jingji looked at Yi Xian, really? Yi Xian nodded, really? Jingji blinked, then take my sword again, I'll let you see a powerful swordsman. Don't worry, I promise you that this time, I'll really draw my sword. Yi Xian smiled, how about this, you take my sword first. Then I'll take your sword. What do you think? Jingji smiled and didn't say anything. Yi Xian laughed, you're not afraid that I'll kill you in a second, are you? Jingji smiled, you're trying to provoke me. Yi Xian smiled, I still have a very powerful sword technique, and I think it should be able to pose a threat to you. But I'm not sure. The left general suddenly said, Holy Lord, this person's sword technique is indeed quite good. A powerful sword technique. Jingji smiled, now that you mention it, I'm a little interested. Come, I'll take your sword. I hope your powerful sword technique doesn't disappoint me. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. You don't mind if I treat my injuries first? Jingji smiled, I don't mind. Yi Xian nodded, sat down cross-legged, and began to treat his injuries. Jingji suddenly looked at Shaoan and smiled, and Wujuan, I didn't expect you to know such an interesting person. How interesting. Shaoan slowly closed his eyes and didn't say anything. Jingji didn't look for trouble, she looked at the Supreme Law Fan Duo, Your Excellency, do you really want to get involved in this mess? Fan Duo was silent. Jingji continued, he's getting involved in the ancient god world's affairs. Do you know about the ancient god world? It's a place where the martial arts civilization is higher than this universe. If you get involved with him, I'm afraid it won't end well. Fan Duo asked, do you know him? Jingji glanced at Yi Xian, him? Fan Duo smiled, yes. Jingji smiled, you know nothing about the ancient god world. Fan Duo said, you know nothing about that woman. Jingji's eyes narrowed, that woman? Fan Duo smiled, there's no need to say more. I'll take this good karma. Even if it turns into an ill-fated karma, I won't regret it. Jingji suddenly turned to Yi Xian and smiled, it seems you really aren't simple. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and walked toward Jingji, Miss, I created this sword technique myself. It's extremely powerful, you have to be careful. Jingji smiled, all right. Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Jingji narrowed her eyes and pressed her left thumb against the hilt of her sword. At this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of her. Jingji flicked his left thumb and the sword suddenly flew out. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword fell. At the instant Yi Xian's sword descended, the expressions of everyone present changed drastically. Sword intent. At this moment, Yi Xian used the sword intent left behind by his father. Boom! In front of everyone's eyes, Jingji was suddenly sent flying, and the moment he was sent flying, his body directly shattered, and countless streams of light scattered, her divine body shattered. However, her soul was forcibly preserved. Jingji looked up at Yi Xian, this isn't your sword intent. Yi Xian asked, it's mine. Jingji narrowed his eyes, it's not yours. Yi Xian said seriously, what's my father's is mine. Is there a problem? Everyone. P.S. A reader named Unfettered One asked me to ask. How can it be cured in such a short time? Chapter 1828. At this moment, everyone in the surroundings was shocked. Yi Xian destroyed Jingji's body with one sword strike. Of course, they were not shocked by Yi Xian's strength, but the sword Dao will that Yi Xian displayed just now. That was just a wisp of sword Dao will. Jingji suddenly smiled. Everyone looked at Jingji. Jingji looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, it seems that I need to know you well. Yi Xian said with a smile, we can get to know each other better. Jingji smiled brightly, definitely. After saying that, she and the people around her returned to the palace. In the next moment, the 9 dragons pulled the palace and slowly disappeared into the starry sky. Yi Xian said softly, "Can you stop them from leaving?" Shaoan shook his head, "No." Yi Xian turned to look at Shaoan. "Her body has been destroyed. Can't we kill her?" Shaoan shook his head, "No." Yi Xian was silent. Shaoan suddenly asked, "That wisp of sword Dao will?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "It belongs to my father." Shaoan nodded slightly, "Your father is really powerful. Just like your sister." Yi Xian suddenly said, "I have an elder brother who is as powerful as my father and my sister." Xiao An's expression froze. At the side, Fondwa's face couldn't help but twitch. This guy is simply a freak. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Shaoan, how long do you think they will come again?" Shaoan looked into the depths of the starry sky. She didn't leave. She just escaped into the space-time. She will wait for her people to come. 10 days at most. After 10 days, her people will come. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "So, we only have 100 years?" Shaoan nodded, "Yes." Yi Xian asked, "Is it enough?" Shaoan glanced at Yi Xian, "It's completely enough. But since you helped me, she and the ancient devil won't let you go." Yi Xian asked, "If I don't help you, will they let me go?" Shaoan shook his head. "No." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Meeting you and getting to know you, is it my misfortune?" Xiao An's expression gradually turned cold. "Forget it." Yi Xian smiled and said, "But I don't regret it." With that, he turned around and left. Shaoan was stunned, and then his cold expression gradually softened. Fan Duo spoke abruptly, "Be careful of him. He's gaudy and skilled at deceiving women." Shaoan said, "I think he's pretty down to earth." With that, she turned around and left. Fan Duo shook her head and sighed. Practical? Is this bastard honest? This was the biggest joke in the universe. At this moment, Swan Yi suddenly appeared on the field. Tong Yi glanced at Yi Xian and Shaoan in the distance. "Who is that woman?" Fan Duo said, "Ancient God World." Tao Yi frowned slightly. "That place?" Fan Duo glanced at Tao Yi, "You seem to know." Tao Yi said indifferently, "I know about Tao Yi. I heard that the people there think highly of themselves and call themselves gods." With that, she paused and said, "How did Yi Xian provoke the people of that place?" Fan Duo said indifferently, "Guess." Swan Yi looked at Fan Duo, "Even if you don't know how powerful the ancient god world is, you should know that it's not an ordinary place. Yet, you still stand on his side. This means that the woman behind him is even more terrifying than the ancient god world." Fan Duo smiled. Swan Yi, "What? You've given up on killing him? Why?" Swan Yi said indifferently, "Is there any benefit in killing him? If there is, then there is only one benefit, and that is to vent my anger. But it's not worth it to lose my life for this anger." Fan Duo chuckled. "I thought you would target him to death." Swan Yi stared at Fan Duo, "What is his background?" Fan Duo shook her head, "I don't know either." With that, she turned around and left. Swan Yi stood there in silence. At this time, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Swan Yi. It was the Left General from before. The Left General said, "Your Excellency, my holy lord invites you." Swan Yi smiled, "Invite me?" The Left General nodded. "Holy lord said to chat." "Chat?" Swan Yi thought for a moment, then smiled, "Sure." The Left General said, "Please." The two disappeared into the starry sky. Soon, Swan Yi arrived in an unknown starry sky. Swan Yi looked into the distance and saw a floating palace. It was Jingji's palace. Swan Yi followed the Left General to the front of the palace. As soon as they arrived, Jingji came out to greet them. At this time, she had recovered her physical body. Jingji smiled, "Welcome, Supreme Swan Yi." Swan Yi smiled, "Holy Lord can call me Swan Yi." Jingji blinked, then I won't be polite. Swan Yi, I am an honest person and don't like to beat around the bush. I invited you here this time because I want to invite you to deal with Yi Xian and Supreme Fan Duo. Swan Yi smiled, shouldn't it be Littlein? Jingji smiled, yes. It's good that we have a common enemy. Swan Yi smiled and did not speak. Jingji looked into the distant starry sky and smiled. Swan Yi, can you tell me about Yi Xian? I don't know much about him. Swan Yi was silent for a moment, then said, he is not a simple person. His background is mysterious, and the person behind him is very powerful. Jingji looked at Swan Yi and asked, how powerful is the person behind him? Swan Yi shook her head, I don't know. I don't know. Jingji chuckled and said, how interesting. I didn't expect to meet a second generation. Swan Yi said, ordinary forces cannot raise a person like Yi Xian. He must have a powerful force behind him. Looking at this universe, other than the ancient god realm, are there any other powerful forces? Jingji knew, too. One is the ancient demon, and the other is the very one. She shook her head and smiled, but he can't be from these two forces. Swan Yi frowned, are you sure? Jingji nodded, yes. Swan Yi was silent. Jingji smiled, it looks like there are powerful forces we don't know about. Then she looked at Swan Yi, Miss Swan Yi, do you have any plans? Swan Yi smiled, I need to go into seclusion for a while. Jingji blinked, you won't join us to deal with Yi Xian and Supreme Fan Duo? Swan Yi shook her head, I'm tired. I don't like fighting and killing anymore. Good luck to you, Sacred Lord. Then she turned around and left. Jingji watched Swan Yi leave and smiled, but didn't say anything. Beside her, Zhujiang suddenly said, Sacred Lord, we can't give Yi Xian and Lord Wu that much time. Jingji smiled, of course I know we can't give them that much time, but the problem is, how do we kill them? Are you going to kill them? Zhujiang lowered her head. Jingji slowly closed her eyes. How long until our people and the ancient demon clan arrive? Zhujiang said, our people need about 9 days, and the ancient demon clan should arrive in 7 days. Jingji suddenly said, tell our people that if they don't arrive in 7 days, I will shatter their souls. Then she glanced at Zhujiang, don't lose to the ancient demon clan in everything. It's too embarrassing. Zhujiang hurriedly lowered her head, understood. Jingji said again, also, help me do one thing, and that is to investigate Yi Xian. The more detailed, the better. Don't leave out any details, including how many times he pees a day, understand? Zhujiang hesitated, then said, Sacred Lord, we also need to investigate how many times he pees a day. This, Jingji looked at Zhujiang, how many times he pees a day, we can infer whether he has a weak kidney, understand? Zhujiang, Jingji didn't say anything else, turned around and left. Inside Xiao Ta's room. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground with his eyes closed. Healing. He hadn't fully recovered from the previous battle with Jingji. Half an hour later, Yi Xian took a deep breath, his injuries were all healed. Yi Xian went to Shaoan, help me achieve divine body. Divine body. The battle with Jingji made him understand that there was still a big gap between him and Shaoan and Jingji. He had to reach the divine body realm. Only when he reached the divine body realm could he fight with Shaoan and Jingji. Shaoan said, as long as they don't trouble you during this time, there won't be a problem. Yi Xian said, no matter what, we have to hurry. Shaoan nodded, let's start now. In the following time, Shaoan began to help Yi Xian improve with all his strength. Somewhere in the starry sky, Jingji sat in front of the main hall, reading an ancient book with great interest. At this moment, Zhujiang suddenly appeared in front of Jingji. Zhujiang bowed slightly, then took out a scroll and handed it to Jingji. Sacred Lord, this is all the information on Yi Xian. Jingji put down the ancient book in her hand and took the scroll. After reading for a while, she gradually frowned. After a long time, Jingji put down the scroll and said softly, "Don't touch this person. Don't touch this person." Zhujiang frowned slightly, and he hesitated for a moment before he said, "Sacred Lord, although the woman in a plain dress and the man in green are strong, they might only be experts at the body form realm." "We." "Idiot." Jingji suddenly interrupted Zhujiang. "If they're really only at the body form realm, how could they destroy my divine body with a strand of sword Dao will? And that woman in a plain dress wiped out 1,000,000 living beings with a single strike of her sword. Although I can do it as well, you've overlooked something, and that's how much strength she used to wipe out those powerful living beings. Is 100% of her strength the same as 10% of her strength?" Zhujiang fell silent. Jingji continued, "Besides that, Supreme Fan Duo was still willing to help Yi Xian after seeing us. Why? Is she out of her mind? No. It's because she feels that the person behind Yi Xian is stronger than us." As she spoke, she stood up and said, "The divine object that Yi Xian has, 10 years inside the object is 1 day outside. Not to mention me, even the god ancestor couldn't achieve such a divine sense. And to achieve this, there's only one possibility, and that is to reverse the spacetime of this current universe. Not only that, but to reverse the spacetime of our universe." Speaking of this, she looked up at the starry sky, and a trace of fear flashed in her eyes. "I speculate that the woman in a plain dress is very likely to have jumped out of this current universe." You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.